Okay, that should be all good now.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, welcome everyone to the Economic Development and Recovery Committee meeting. First one under that title. It's nice to see you all here. I'll go through the official spiel and then I'll make a couple of very short points. So this is a meeting of the council which is being held remotely. The meeting is being recorded and streamed via YouTube, where members of the public are able to watch the meeting. Please note that any comments posted on the chat feed of the council's YouTube page during the recording of this meeting are not monitored by the council. The recording will be available on the council's website following the meeting. All members have been provided with a remote committee guidance note prior to the meeting. Please can these be adhered to during this remote meeting? Points include, but are not limited to, all mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent, so that, checking my own, so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Please switch your profile to mute unless you're speaking, and then remember to turn it back on when you are speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. We've already covered that. In order that I'm aware you wish to speak, either the old-fashioned way or the new technological way will do. For each item, officers will present the report and then the committee will discuss it, after which, if there are any group leaders present, they will be asked if they have any comments to make. Now, there aren't at the moment, but obviously if they were to join, then we will go with that. So thank you all for attending. It's nice to see everyone present and looking fit and well in these challenging times. That's always good news. Welcome to my new Vice Chair, Councillor Alan Davis, who you'll all be familiar with. And also welcome Councillor Eunice Brockman to the committee. Again, I'm sure you're all aware of her as well, and certainly of her mug now after that disgraceful performance a couple of minutes ago. So yeah, I think, as I say, we've got no apologies for absence. So if we can move towards declaration, any declarations of interest? Not, oh, hang on. Councillor Buckley. You're on mute, Councillor Buckley.
Sorry, I thought I managed to do that the other night. Yeah, just as a member of Essex County Council, we've got an item about care leavers and jams in particular, so just a general non-pecuniary interest. Yeah, no, appreciate it. I think Councillor Davis has vindicated on the same point, so yeah, I think that's covered that one. I don't think anyone else has expressed any interest in registering an interest. The minutes of the last meeting, pages 3 to 8. Any observations on the minutes before we go to record them as an accurate record? Councillor Sargent.
Yes, Chairman. The minutes are of the External Affairs and Partnership Committee, and this committee isn't that committee. So can you explain, please, the change? Because we haven't been informed.
Well, of course I can, Councillor Sargent, and I don't think it's entirely accurate to say you haven't been informed. There was a reconfiguration of the committees a month or two ago, which members were notified about, and basically what was the old Infrastructure and Inclusive Growth Committee covered economic development. That's now, the brief of that has changed. It's now strategic planning and infrastructure, because so much is going on around our town centres that otherwise the brief of that committee would just be impossible. So we took on the brief for economic development, and I'm not quite sure what your issue is beyond that. So it seems fairly straightforward to me.
Well, I was aware, because at the last meeting, Chairman, we took on that brief and that was it. That was tagged on to the end of the external affairs. And I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, the AGM was cancelled and there was a meeting of the staffing committee, yep. And this new committee came out of it. But what I said was, there was no note to this committee to let us know that it was a new committee, not a continuation of the other one. So what I'm saying is you're asking us to agree the minutes of that meeting at this meeting. So that's what my point is. This meeting is not the same meeting. It's the economic development, whereas the other meeting was the external affairs and partnerships. That's the point I'm making, Chairman.
Yeah, okay, I understand the point. I think it's incredibly pedantic and pointless, but I do understand the point. Anything else on the minutes?
That's your view, Chairman.
Yeah, it is my view because I just said.
And I've given you mine. Thank you.
So it's my view because I said I think, therefore it is my view. Right. Anything else? I'm not seeing anyone on that. So can we move to a vote on the minutes? First off, Councillor Brockman.
I wasn't there, so I can't really.
Well, it's up to you, Councillor Brockman. You can vote in favour if you accept them as an accurate record. You don't actually have to have been there. It's entirely up to you.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't there. I can't say one way.
Okay, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Councillor Buckley.
I will vote in favour, but Councillor Brockman has done the right thing. If you're not there, you can't tell whether they're accurate or not.
No, I'm not disagreeing with the point. My point is that under council procedures, you are allowed to vote in favour, even if you weren't there. You know, that's merely my point.
I do understand that, but I think it's
no, that's well,
situation.
Everyone is allowed to interpret that regulation as they see fit and right. Okay, Councillor Davis.
Watched the meeting online. I've read the minutes and can confirm that they're accurate.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Jeffrey.
4.
Thank you. Councillor, it's me. Favour. Councillor Sargent.
Well, because of the point that I just made, I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you very much. I've just muted myself, so I've been telling everyone else that I've done exactly the same thing myself. We're now going to have a item from CAB, a response to COVID-19, and so basically assessing where we are now and where we're likely to be in the next weeks and months. And Kathy, thanks for joining us. Difficult one for you, I realise, because things are changing so quickly. But I think in a way that's why it's really important to hear what you've got to say. If we remember, this committee or its predecessor heard, from the CAB earlier this year. It was a very different world then. It was one that had its issues, but quite different than we're facing now. Some of you will know, some of you won't. We've got a COVID-19 response working group that since June time, May. Thanks, Joe. Since May, I've been meeting regularly to analyse the issues we're facing and try to come up with policies and identify areas to go to committees around, all the issues that COVID is throwing up. So and again, Kathy came to our July meeting virtually, and what was interesting that even then was not only the amount of issues the CAB had to deal with, the amount of individuals, etc., but how that had changed in a short space of time. So initially it was things around COVID itself and getting medication, getting deliveries, all of that. And it kind of moved very quickly, even by July, to issues around debt and employment rights and the prospect of redundancy. Now, not wanting to preempt what Kathy's got to say, but I'm guessing that's moved on quite a bit. And unfortunately, I'd love to be wrong on this, that it's going to move on even more so, because the furlough scheme as we know it is coming to an end. Now, I know there is a replacement job retention scheme, and far be it from me to say it's, to question that, because, it's better than nothing, clearly. But and again, I think Kathy will know this, but talking to employers, most of them seem to feel it doesn't really fit. It's not really fit for purpose. Now, that said, I think that the furlough scheme that has existed up until now and just about still does, has been really, really important and has probably saved us from being over the precipice already. Anyway, I'll probably rabbited on too long, so over to Kathy. And Kathy, welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Much appreciated for the introduction, and good to see you all. What I thought I would do is run through what St Spice has been doing so far, and then talk about a little bit about looking ahead. Please stop me at any point in time if you want to ask questions. I can see half a dozen.
Can I just say at this point, personally, I prefer if you did your presentation and then we did the questions, because otherwise.
Okay. Because when I'm normally doing a presentation to staff and volunteers, I let them interrupt me. Okay, so thinking back to March, which seems like a very long time ago now, doesn't it? So we closed all our face-to-face services in Basildon, Billericay and Wickford back on the 23rd of March when we went into lockdown. We switched all our services to phone, email and web chat, so non-face-to-face channels. And staff and all the some of the volunteers are working at home. We did lose some volunteers in that they're inactive at the moment. They didn't want to work remotely for a variety of reasons. So we have 29 active volunteers at the moment logging into our systems from home. We were helped greatly by the fact that we have a national platform. So we've got the national website, we've got national systems, we've got Casebook, our own system. So that's a big help to us. That includes things like Advice Line, which is our national telephone service, and we have a local number for local residents. And I'll talk more about some developments on that in a moment. In the first 6 months of this year, so from the 1st of April to the end of September, we've helped 3,549 unique Basildon, Billericay and Wickford clients with 8,657 issues. That's a lot of issues. So as you can tell, most people come along with more than one issue going on. The main issues, they're not going to be any surprise to you. Universal credit, debt, benefits, so I'm talking about legacy benefits, things like employment support allowance, personal independence payment, and employment issues. So every time there's a change around furlough, redundancy, the job retention scheme, of course, we get more queries coming in. We saw a 60%, so 60% rise in employment queries in Q1. That's huge for us and huge for the team to get their heads around all the changes. And then in Q2, we've seen a 35% increase compared to Q1 in universal credit issues and applications. So yes, you can kind of see the direction of travel reflects what's been reported nationally. Debt inquiries were quiet at the start, and probably really up until quite recently was still reasonably quiet. So we have quite a good team funded by the Money and Pension Service, and they were not fully utilised, which is always a worry to me if they've not got everything they need to be doing. So that has got busier recently. I think that's partly because debts were building up and people were just not addressing them to start with, whereas now it's getting to a point where they need to. And of course, we've also got some evictions starting where notice was served pre-lockdown. So not evictions that are on hold for now in terms of council properties, but you're talking about private landlords who served notice pre-lockdown. We then reopened our face-to-face service in Basildon on the 24th of August. So that's after making it COVID-19 compliant and putting in lots of measures. We also have a lot of support from, and I want to say thank you to the council staff. So this is the front of house team in the council, Claire Wade in particular, her team, but also the security guards. They're brilliant because they are helping us. We're dealing with people through drop-in, so we're doing temperature checks and they're coordinating how many people are in to see us at any one time. So that's brilliant, that works really well. We're open only 2 mornings a week. So compared to pre-COVID lockdown, when we were open 5 days a week, 9 till 5, this is 2 mornings a week, 9:30 to 12 for face-to-face drop-in. What we're trying to do is keep that to people who need the face-to-face, not just happen to be passing but could have rang us anyway. That's not always easy to achieve, but that's the aim. We also do some appointments, and we have access to council face-to-face desks as well if we can't accommodate within our own offices. So again, that's been really helpful. Our own offices, like a lot of people, are quite small. So we have a lot of small buildings and small rooms, and so it's quite difficult to make them COVID-19 compliant. So we've introduced video advice in order that we can put people in a face-to-face location, but not necessarily in the same room as the advisor. And in fact, the advisors can be at home, although we've had some of them on site just initially as we did this for the first few months and got used to it and used to the technology. We've also been able to get some extra funding to come in to support additional services. I'll give you a brief summary in terms of warm homes, which comes via something called Affordable Warmth Solutions, National Grid funding. And that's to provide energy advice, benefits and debt advice. There are partners on the project, which include Aaron, who will install in some situations things like boilers, cavity wall insulation, etc. There is an eligibility criteria, as you would expect with that. We had some funding from something called the Suicide Prevention Fund. So that's to help increase capacity, provide more help around benefits, in particular debt advice and relationship breakdown. We also got some funding from Essex County Council. So this is their COVID additional funding, and that's paid for some staff who are doing direct delivery, but also recruiting and training more volunteers. I mentioned earlier at the start of lockdown, losing some volunteers who are not active. So there's been a big campaign to recruit more, and we've currently got over 20 in training, all at various stages in their training, but a lot in training. We also had some funding from Essex Community Foundation. That was to help us with IT hardware, things like phones and laptops, so that people could work remotely from the office. And in fact, what we've now decided to do is, where we replace old IT, so old computers, instead of putting desktop computers in, we're putting laptops in with docking stations. So we've got that portability. It seems to be better value for money doing it that way. We've got some energy redress funding for fuel vouchers for people with prepayment meters. And more recently, with Basildon Council, we've got some DEFRA funding, which is to provide fuel vouchers for people who meet the eligibility criteria, who are struggling with their utility bills. These are cash vouchers, but it's still done through Charis Trust. So it's still a grant from Charis Trust. So there's a good audit trail for that. And we need to spend that money by the end of the year. So it's all guns going to try and get that spent. Billericay Rotary have also given us some funding in order to provide a service for Billericay residents. So this is a helpline initially, although we were hoping to go to a face-to-face service, but like a lot of things, that's been a tad delayed. We are also surveying the Billericay residents because Billericay Rotary are keen to understand the need better so that they can target future funded awards, so that it meets the need that's out there. In the past, they've been able to raise substantial sums when they've been doing things like the fireworks and the Christmas events. Of course, that's a little bit different this year. We're also working with Billericay Food Bank. So where the food bank do a brilliant job giving out food parcels as a short-term measure, we're trying to address the long-term issues and the underlying issues so that people were perhaps less reliant in the future. So then what I thought I would do, that was a very whizzing through kind of what we've been doing over the last 6 months, but just give you a brief flavour of it and try not to bore you too much. What I thought I would do next is talk about sort of looking ahead about the challenges and what we're trying to do. So we have some good news to start with. National Citizens Advice have received some funding from BEIS funding, and they're also using some of their reserves to make our telephone service free phone. So the national number went free phone last week, and our local number, we haven't got the exact date yet when it's going to go free phone. We've applied and we've asked for the first date, which is the 9th of November. We should have that confirmed next week. So as soon as we know, we'll get a new 0808 number, and then we will advertise that will become free, and we'll also put messages on the old number, which was charged at local call rates, but it's still a cost to people, isn't it, if they're trying to contact us. So we're delighted. We're over the moon with this, to be honest, because this has been something we've sought for a long time, to have some sustainable funding going forward that would allow us to offer a free phone service. The catch to it is, I suspect demand will go up because, of course, it makes us more accessible, doesn't it, to people, particularly if they're struggling financially and perhaps couldn't have held on the phone. But I think it's a great thing, so we're really pleased with that. I mentioned earlier about launching a new fuel voucher DEFRA-funded project. So that's where we can give vouchers for people who are struggling with the cost of their utility bills. They need to be vulnerable and meet certain criteria, although there's a broad range of criteria, so a lot of people will meet it. £40 vouchers for single people, £60 vouchers for families. We can give a maximum of 3 vouchers per household. We're not allowed to advertise it. That's against the rules of the funding because of the risk of fraud. So we need to target it and work with partners. So that's what we're doing. We're looking to get more volunteers on the phone. So that's through recruitment, the additional BEIS funding I mentioned earlier. So training more people and peer mentoring them, because of course training people remotely is slightly different to training people face to face. It brings some challenges. We do get them in. When I say we do get them in do 1 or 2 sessions face to face, we have, but whether we'll still be allowed to in the future is another ball game. We'll see. And we're trying to work with some of the inactive volunteers to understand the barriers to them coming back. Because initially at the start of lockdown, some of them were, we don't want to do telephone, we want to do face-to-face, we like the social interaction, which we completely understand. And so they've taken a bit of a break. Now, the longer they take a break, the more difficult it is to come back to. So we're trying to encourage some of them to come back and understand what the barriers are. So we've been giving people things like headsets, so it's more confidential space at home, and also phones as well that are linked to their modems. So they're like soft phones, but it works better and cuts down their costs. We cover their costs, but it makes it easier for them. We're also looking at video advice. We're testing something called Attend Anywhere. Attend Anywhere is used quite a lot in the NHS, has things like waiting rooms in it, which may allow us to put video access points in elsewhere in the borough. That's very early stages yet. If you ask me too many technical questions about it, I probably couldn't answer them. But it's something that's quite interesting, because the next thing we're looking at is our premises. So the way we're trying to understand if we will need our premises in the same way in the future. Probably not is the best answer. How we need them is the difficult one to answer. So if you said to me, how many people do you think will need face-to-face services in 6 months' time? I can't really give you an answer on it. It's really difficult to say. I would like to think that a legacy from this will be doing more by non-face-to-face channels, so that perhaps we can cut some of the costs down of premises and then deliver more services. And so an example of that would be in Wickford. And the reason we're looking at Wickford first is because we've got a private rented property there and the lease expires on March next year. Sounds like a long way off, doesn't it? But it's going to come around really quickly. We're quite attached to Wickford because we've been there 30 odd years, and we do want to deliver a face-to-face service still in Wickford. It's where and how we're looking at. So, for example, we've had a conversation with the library. They're moving and their space might be quite restricted and they might not have as much space as we had hoped. So again, that kind of video access point could be a solution, but it's something we're looking at. We're also looking at a law clinic. So you may be aware that elsewhere in Essex, there are 2 law clinics, one in Harlow and one in Chelmsford, both run by Citizens Advice. And although in Basildon we provide pro bono legal advice with about 8 local solicitors who are still operating for us, delivering that remotely, a law clinic is perhaps a more wraparound service that provides some feedback from the solicitors. So at the moment we do a triage. The client may well go off and receive, say, 15-20 minutes pro bono from the solicitor. The problem comes for us when the client comes back in and says, I've seen the solicitor and they told me to do X, Y, and Z and it hasn't worked. And of course, we don't know quite what the solicitor told them. So a law clinic would perhaps provide that more wraparound service, more complete service. So we're looking at that, particularly with the fact that we think employment issues are going to increase. So having access to pro bono support and legal support around employment could be quite helpful. I'm going to smile at this one and you'll understand why. So we're also talking to RAD, the Royal Association for the Deaf, to see how we can improve remote services for those who are hard of hearing. Because of course it is a big issue. We've often talked about how it's difficult to hear people through masks and screens. But if you are hard of hearing, then that's even more challenging. So we're trying to understand, can we work with them and reduce the barriers down there as well? National Citizens Advice have developed a forecast model. Don't get too excited at this point. I think it's going to tell you everything that's going to happen in the next 6 months. Because I looked at it and thought, oh, this could be really quite interesting. What it does is so there's a group of them who work in policy, advice and content experts who looked at the advice issue code. So this is all the different categories of advice, try to determine which ones they would predict see a dramatic increase in. And so they came up with a lovely long list, but mainly they were looking at benefits, so in particular personal independence payment, employment support allowance and universal credit. That's going to be no surprise, is it? But they particularly thought universal credit would be the initial claim and conditionality, so sanctions, that type of thing, particularly because the initial tranche of universal credit claims, when they were made, they weren't checking or asking people to bring in evidence because they were reducing the barriers to access universal credit, understandably. So there could be some people who got it and may not have been entitled to all of their universal credit claim. In around employment, they felt in particular it was going to be pay and entitlement. So we're already seeing that with people who are querying the amount if they get under furlough, they're querying the amount the employer might give them in the future, trying to understand that. And also around redundancy. So, I mean, just to give you an example from a recent case, we had a client call us who was querying the amount she was going to receive as part of her statutory redundancy pay. So after checking she wasn't entitled to contractual, we did check the amount and she was right, it had been calculated wrong. What the employer had done, and I'm not blaming employers because it's very confusing, is that they had calculated as at today's date, she was entitled to a certain amount of notice. That notice would take her into another year's full service, which was very close to that another year's full service. So she's actually entitled to another £1,000. So that's a big chunk of money, isn't it, that she would get? So we helped her with that. Housing, they can see an issue there around private rental properties and also around threatened homelessness. I think it all links into the next biggest issue, which is debt. So they came up with a whacking great big long list of issues around debt, almost everything they foresee being massively increased next year. No one just knows quite when. I suspect it's not going to be until kind of 21 onwards. This year seems to be okay. Just touching wood. The other thing they're looking at, we've just slightly got, not forgotten, but got sort of pushed behind a bit, is immigration issues, because of course in the middle of all this we've got Brexit coming up as well. We have also received just recently, so the project hasn't launched yet, we've got some energy redress funding for what they call Round 8, and this is to do what's called a warm start project, concentrating on advice for families, so people with dependent children, and it's around energy, it's around debt and benefits, so all the primary issues that are out there. And then later on, we're submitting a Community Justice Foundation bid that will go in wave 2, because wave 1 on their bidding is all has to be spent by March next year. And our big concern at the moment is there's a lot of funding out there, but a lot of it has to be spent by March. And I think a lot of the issues are actually going to be post-March. So we're a little bit concerned about that, and sort of trying to work with some of the funders and perhaps go for some of the bids that are longer term rather than that short term funding. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of a flavour for what's happened, what we're working on at the moment, what our priorities are over the next few months, and the numbers of people we've been helping. Have you got any questions? Or have I just confused you all?
No, first of all, thanks, Kathy. Not only for the presentation, which was fascinating and worrying in equal measure, but really useful, but also for the work that you and all of your organisation have been doing over the last 6 months or so. You know, it is appreciated. I think hopefully we've worked as a council with the citizens' advice very closely and very well. I think we've learned quite a bit. So going forward, hopefully there's plenty to hark back to, and you know, going forward we'll be in a stronger position because of that. One thing I wanted to say was, because obviously it very much relates to debt and worry about homelessness as well. The two are often tied together. Is, as I'm sure you know, Kathy, what the council did quite early on as a result of the COVID working group was say that you know, for the rest of the financial year, no one will be evicted from council property because of economic hardship, genuine economic hardship caused by COVID. And I'm very proud about that. What we're waiting for is to see where Clarion and Swan are on that, because part of the motivation for that was to bring other big housing providers along with us. So I haven't got a definitive answer on that yet, but hopefully things will improve, because in reality, as you know, Kathy, the council, well, most of us know, the council works very closely with people who have genuine financial problems in council properties, but not everyone knows that. So it's the worry. It's the perception that, oh my God, I'm going to be out of my home in a few months' time or whatever. So if you could help us get that message across as well, we've, you know, obviously we're doing it already, but you know, when people come to you, please tell them if they're in a council property, there is, you know, contact the relevant staff, and that you know, it will be dealt with. And
we do that. I should say that the council staff have been really helpful. So, you know, people like Leslie O'Shea, Carol Burton, Grant as well, everybody's been very supportive, and we do feel like we are working together. We still retain that independent status. We're still an independent charity, but it is us all trying to achieve the same thing, which is the right outcome for our local residents. And yes, when I referred to evictions, that tends to be private landlords who serve notice some, you know, 6 months ago now. And unfortunately, a lot of them are dealing with very high rent arrears. And that's a completely different situation. Yeah, sure. And they have to have some way of resolving that situation. But we are firm believers in trying to resolve the issues before they get anywhere near that situation. And that's always quite difficult, isn't it? Because people worry and panic and don't think they can ask for help, particularly with debt. What I would say is, at the moment, actually, it's almost easier because you've got a separate money advice helpline for the local area. You will get through to us. You can leave us a voicemail and we will get back to you. And actually, the appointments are literally only about 3-4 days away. So people are not having to wait the same length of time they used to have to wait for a debt appointment. So that's really good. We're asking for referrals to come in from a variety of places, including the council, and your staff do refer into us. That's really good. We're also part of something called Care Navigation Plus, which was set up by Essex County Council. So we're getting referrals in from other organisations as well. So people like community agents are referring in. And so that's helpful to just try and reduce those barriers down so people can come to us from other partners, also themselves ring us direct as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. And yeah, no, absolutely. We want you to be as independent as possible, but working collaboratively. You know, we don't want you to become an arm of Basildon Council. In fact, and I know you don't want to be that either. But you know, but it's good that we've got the communication we have. I appreciate that. Anyway, I'll open it up. Is anyone indicating? I can't see anyone at the moment. Oh no, I can now. Sorry, I think Councillor Sargent was first, and then Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Well, Kathy, you've gone from strength to strength since we you know, several years ago when you took on the whole of the advice service, and I think you're doing an absolutely remarkable job there, especially in these difficult times. And what really pleases me is the amount of funding that you're actually bringing in as well, because I don't think you'd be managing on the money that the council gives you, unfortunately. But I mean, that was the idea, that you would seek funding, and the amount of people that you're helping is absolutely incredible. So well done to you and all the people and volunteers that are there. I've only got one question for you. I mean, I am concerned, but just to say, I'm really concerned about those private rented. We know that the council tenants are safe, but it's the private rented that really is going to be challenging, because you can understand it from the homeowner's point of view. They can no longer afford to pay their mortgages, etc. But then there's the tenant, because I understand, you know, the council have got to put some tenants into private renting because we don't have the properties. But I'm just concerned about those challenges there. But I also wanted to ask you mentioned PIP quite a bit. How are you getting on with all the PIP and the disability advice, Kathy? How is all of that going on during COVID? Because obviously you're dealing with quite a number of vulnerable people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yes, going back to what you're saying about funding, I'm pleased as well. Part of the reason for being able to get more funding in is we merged twice, once with Thurrock back in 2018, and then we merged with Brentwood and Rochford and Raleigh to create Citizens Advice South Essex in 2019. What that means is, rather than it just being me as the manager looking after my own little Citizens Advice, I've now got a team of 4 of us. So we are able to do far more in terms of fundraising, because we're not duplicating some of the things that we used to do for National Citizens Advice. So we used to all report to National Citizens Advice. Now we just do that once. It's a bigger report, but of course it doesn't take 4 times to do it. So it saved a bit of time, which meant we can do more funding applications. I also think we're a little bit more attractive to some funders because we cover that wider geographic area. So it makes us a bit more economical and a bit more attractive to them. So that's good. In terms of PIP, yes, we are still helping people either apply for PIP or do the mandatory reconsiderations and do the appeals. We have seen a reduction during lockdown and COVID of people appealing, which is a worry to me. And it was one of the reasons that we reopened the face-to-face service as a drop-in. A lot of organisations have only opened for appointments only. I'm a bit concerned that some of our more vulnerable residents aren't accessing via telephone and digital channels. And I don't understand completely all the reasons why, but that can be a confidence thing. that can be perhaps a disability that prevents you from being able to access via those channels as well. So, you know, we've had some issues where, you know, we had to send someone a form and then go around and collect it. So we've done a bit of that where we're literally dropping forms off, picking them back up again to get them to sign it and filling things in for them. We've had people who are blind who we're talking to, but they don't know the information they've got because they didn't have anybody else coming into the home to look after them and look at the information. So of course there've been perhaps more protracted processes in order to try and get those application forms done, but the team have been brilliant. And you know, you were saying thank you at the start, but it's the team we've got working for us. They are so brilliant. The volunteers in particular, they're worth their weight in gold. So yes, it is a concern for us, and that was why we opened up the face-to-face service, so that we could do more for people who are not accessing via different channels.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Buckley was next, unless Councillor Sargent needed to come back. I don't think so. No, thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, first of all, I think we all recognise the good work that CAB has done, and I've been around the council for an awful long while now, and I've seen it evolve over the years. I hadn't realised the extent of the merge, as I'd hasten to add, but having said that, it sounds as though they're working out and delivering the resources that you need to deliver the service, which is great news. I've just got a couple of points to mention. I will just mention for the record, Chairman, I am a private landlord, so I probably technically ought to declare that as an interest. Having said that, I know none of my tenants have needed to come to you because they work in the health service and they're still being paid, but so that's the good news. But significant points, you talked about the free phone number, and I think that's great news. I would just like to say, think about how that's publicised, because there are other numbers which are premium numbers which also start 08, and bearing in mind that you're dealing largely with vulnerable people, it's very easy for them to be forwarded by somebody else. So, you know, I'm not quite sure how you're going to manage that, but I just flag that up as a potential issue. In terms of Wickford, I think Wickford's had a CAB for as long as I can remember. And, you know, leases run out on premises become unsuitable, needs change. I would very much like to see you maintain a presence in Wickford. I don't really mind where precisely, but there's obviously been a lot of change with businesses in the area. You mentioned the library, that's relocating. I don't know whether you have any methodology employed for looking for alternative premises, but some businesses do have vacant spaces at the back or upstairs. Upstairs may not always be suitable for the clients, I understand. But yeah, obviously if there's any way that Basildon or the County Council can assist on that, we would obviously be pleased to do so. So I'm just trying to read my own scribble now. Yeah, the face-to-face meetings, obviously the ideal way for any sort of advice, because yeah, I think, and we were chatting before the meeting, that if you can see people's body language and facial expressions, it tells you whether there's a bit more to dig into or a bit more information that needs to be prized out. So obviously I'd like to see those maximised wherever possible, but I do realise that in the current climate that's a big issue. One thing that does concern me, those of us here are all becoming more and more accustomed to working online, and yeah, I run virtually all of my interests online. I've got another screen on the right here that does all my banking and savings and you name it, it's on there. Pays the bills. What I have noticed is a growth in basically fraudulent or scam type websites. And again, coming back to the people that many of the clients are potentially vulnerable clients, I'm very concerned. There's somebody phoned me up this afternoon who is somebody who's well-educated, professional person, and had been told that there was a really brilliant investment to be made in some sort of cryptocurrency. It wasn't even Bitcoin. My advice to him is don't touch it with a barge pole, but I'm not qualified to give financial advice. So what sort of warnings can you give to those people about the scams? It's obviously not just things like that. Sometimes it's PayPal or whatever else that has. I think I'll probably better shut up there rather than run through the rest of my notes, Chairman.
You've made lots of notes.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, much appreciated. If I take the Wickford issue there, yes, I would quite like us to be in the back of perhaps a shop or a bank or, you know, somewhere where we're not perhaps the primary leaseholder, but we can contribute towards someone else's overhead, so we can help perhaps another business, but one that's a kind of compatible with citizens' advice. So yes, definitely, if we can get some help to try and talk to other businesses in the area from either Basildon Council or Essex County Council, we would welcome that, because we're using our contacts, but it doesn't sound anywhere near as good as the ones you're going to have. So that would be great. In terms of the free phone number, yes, we're well aware we're going to have to be really careful how we advertise this. I would have preferred it to have been obviously an 0800 number. As I understand it, it's 0808, which is still free phone. National Citizens Advice are going to give us templates to help with that promotional work, and they have people who are probably far better than me at writing press releases and promoting it, so that will be really helpful. And we also do a lot of work to try and raise awareness of scams. So Citizens Advice runs the National Consumer Service, so of course we refer directly into them and they refer into us, and we work quite closely with Trading Standards. So we are well aware of scams that are going round, and we try everything from promoting awareness of them and what to do on things like our social media, but also the team are well aware when they're talking to people to ask them the relevant questions as well. And also it extends to things like money laundering, and also to people being aware of loan sharks as well, because that can be an issue. So we work quite closely with the teams around that. Did I cover everything?
I think you did.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm afraid I was too comprehensive in my comments, but you were just right with your answers.
Oh, that's very kind.
I just think I am going to be facetious. I was going to say at the risk of being facetious, the trouble with scams is a really important issue, and I have highlighted it before. But one of the problems with scams is they are, it's fast moving. They're clever. And it changes. I mean, some of them aren't so clever. The amount of money I've got in Nigeria apparently is phenomenal, just waiting to be claimed. But they're the fairly basic ones. Some of them are pretty smart, and also particularly when you're dealing with vulnerable people as well. It's evil, and I think Citizens Advice do a great job, but it's difficult because it is moving on. I think Thomas, you wanted to come in on the Wickford thing. Have you got a cunning plan?
Well, all I was going to offer, Chair and members, and particularly for Kathy, is you may be aware, Kathy, but we were awarded certain funding from government in terms of reopening the high streets. We are engaging with a number of those retailers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed that request that you've just made to my team. There's a great guy working in all of the towns called Patrick Cole, and he's our main interface. I'm going to ask him to hook up with you and see if there's any opportunities to try and get you some presence in the high street and in the shops, subject to, obviously the retailers' own views, but at least we can get a dialogue going for you.
That would be really helpful, thank you. I mean, a lot of organisations would welcome citizens' advice because our brand name, I don't need to do any promotion with the brand name, it speaks for itself. So it would be a great thing to pair up with somebody. It could help both organisations as well as then still making us accessible to the public. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry,
Oh.
Jim, just can I
Councillor
briefly-
Brockman.
Yeah, could I just very briefly mention latest scam.
Sorry, Councillor Buckley, then Councillor Brockman.
Sorry, yeah, latest scam I had was on the TV licence telling me my direct debit hadn't gone through. It's not true because I pay mine in advance because, as members know, I have an intense dislike of direct debits. But that's one that perhaps people should be warned about, especially now the over 75s.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, and I think it's no coincidence that that's happening at the moment. I certainly know that my direct debits for the TV licence paid every month, as my other half works for the BBC, and it's a condition of employment, not surprisingly. So yeah, I'm very much wise to that one. Councillor Brockman.
Could I just say just one little thing with that? It would be incredibly helpful, and you don't have to answer this tonight. You might want to take this away and think about it. But with the council magazine, if we could have a column in there, which we did at one stage, but then I think the magazine kind of changed its format. It would be great to have something in there where we could promote things that we do around the debt advice, but also do things that are very timely around scams, around sort of saving for Christmas, avoiding debt after Christmas, etc. So, you know, it would be very helpful. As I say, you don't have to answer and say, yes, you can do it, because I know you can't say that tonight, but you might want to take it away and have a think about it.
Can't say it tonight, but it strikes me as a very sensible and decent idea. So yeah, no, I mean, we'll have to take it away, but yeah, I think, and one of the problems is things are done quite a bit in advance. So the next issue is pretty much done, but that said, it's not completely done. So yeah, Eunice.
Yeah, regarding the premises, so I don't know if a lot of people know, but the majority of the businesses in Wickford are not actually, the properties are not owned by the council. They're actually privately owned, and landlords are all over the place in the world and not just the UK. What I'm thinking of is, though, the Willow Centre is owned by London and Cambridge, and sometimes they have empty properties in there. Maybe it's worth contacting them and seeing if they'd be willing to let the CAB have a property at maybe cost to them, as it's such a good service. It's worth a try, isn't it?
Definitely worth a try, thank you. I seem to have given you all my Wickford premises issue and you're resolving it for me, so I like this.
Well,
thank you.
I wouldn't get too carried away, Kathy. We're trying to resolve it. I don't know if we've probably resolved it quite yet, but I'm sure with a fair wind we'll get there. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, because there's clearly desire to, which is always the main thing. So that's good. Just a couple of points for me, and the kind of takeaway points, really, Kathy. So I'm not expecting answers at the moment. I think, you know, clearly citizens' advice and the relationship with the council is very positive. We've heard that from, you know, across the board tonight. That's great news. And we really value what you're doing at the moment. So, I mean, I heard your point about space in the Basildon Centre being a possibility. Yeah, it's there to be discussed, definitely. What I would like you to think about is what else, you know, we're doing quite a lot with you already. What else can we do? So another thing, when you mentioned recruitment, is the publicity around recruitment that we can do for you. You mentioned Together Magazine, we've got, you know, the website, social media activity, etc. So, you know, and just generally anything, and in terms of promoting the free phone service, similarly. So, you know, don't be afraid to ask is kind of what I'm saying. And, you know, if there are ideas around what we're not doing that we can do, I mean, I know Grant works with you really closely and other people, and there's an awful lot we're doing already, but, you know, if there's more we can do, great. The usual caveat, Kathy, as long as it doesn't cost anything.
And that's the caveat we're used to.
Yeah.
I would say that, to be honest, the relationship is so good that we wouldn't wait for an event like this to ask. We would ask anyway. But it's a two-way process. You know, your officers often speak to us and we discuss issues, try and figure out how we can help one another. It's all about trying to help the local residents. But that's not just a relationship we have with you in terms of when we co-located in the Basildon Centre. It's a relationship we have with the DWP as well. So they've been equally helpful, and we help them too. So it's nice to see everybody trying to pull together. It's no one's denying it's difficult times, but at least we're all working together to try and resolve the issues, which is good.
Brilliant, Kathy. Thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for everything you and everyone involved with the Citizens Advice are doing. I think I may have made a mistake earlier. I think Malcolm did as well, Councillor Buckley, sorry. We may have referred to you as the CAB at one or two moments. We are very old and it's difficult to change old habits. That's all I'm saying. But we do know what you're called. We do.
That's absolutely fine. I always still refer to it as Citizens Advice Bureau myself sometimes, yes. Don't worry.
And thanks ever so much. It really is appreciated. If I can I just ask if we could pause for literally 1 minute before the next item, because my dog's whining downstairs, and I want to deal with that before it becomes more of an issue, if you catch my drift. Thank you. I'll be as quick as I can.
And I don't think you need me to stay, do you? So I will. Is that all right, Anne?
That's absolutely fine.
Apologise.
Thank you, Kathy.
I should have said that. Whilst you're very welcome to stay, I'm guessing you probably don't want to. So yeah, no, thank you very much.
That's
Thank
fine.
you, Kathy.
Thanks very much.
See you soon.
Good to see you, folks. Take care. Look after yourselves. Bye.
I do apologise for that. Have we got everyone back? Yeah? Got everyone?
We're just waiting for Councillor Brockman.
Oh, okay. I should just say those of us that are fortunate enough to have dogs will understand my frustration when I finally got to let him out of the door. He took one look at the weather and came back in almost immediately. Although
With cats, I'm afraid.
yeah, proof that he's slightly more intelligent than I give him credit for, but there you go.
We have Councillor Brockman back.
Thank
Chairman?
you. Hurrah. Well done. So, okay, next item, and thanks for patience, everyone. I appreciate it. COVID even 19 impact assessment. Tomasz, I think you're going to give us a run through this where we are at the moment. I appreciate things are changing very quickly, but over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and welcome, members. I don't know if you've just seen some of the breaking news coming across the airways, but they're going down with further lockdown in France and Holland and Prague and lots of places overnight, and with more punitive measures being imposed. So it'd be no surprise that that's all going to have a degree of an economic impact. So that's the focus of my quick highlights today from the team. Just to sort of let you know the key activities that we've been focusing on and what we'll be doing over the next couple of months. So in quick succession, business engagement review. We're looking how we can deliver that and to ensure that it's better suited to COVID-19 restrictions. But as I say, that is a rapidly changing environment. You're aware we secured funding through the reopening of the High Street safely. And we're continuing to deliver that, and I'm going to give you some highlights on that very quickly next. On the unemployment and youth unemployment, there's a couple of items immediately following covering the Advice Dawn Kickstart scheme, so we'll cover those in a bit more detail shortly. We're also looking at the stimulation of new industries. We're progressing certainly through the new head of Region of Economic Development, Jim Sims. We're progressing the DigiHub and the Innovation Warehouse, and certainly with a focus in the town centres. And finally, we're looking at the establishing a new skills programme. Jim's been working very hard in establishing links with ESSELA for a new technical university college. So what things have come across the airwaves nationally? I'm sure you're aware of these, but just some highlights. The Chancellor announced new job support scheme. That's going to run for the next 6 months from 1st of November. It's to accommodate those employees that won't be able to continue working. A little bit less favourable than the previous scheme, but it enables them to get at least around about 77% of their pay, and it's capped by the government's contribution to approximately £700 a month. Obviously, they've got to be viable jobs. So, you know, if you're in a nightclub, you might not be necessarily able to secure that funding. But it also extends to self-employed, similar arrangements. But this is more geared towards a shorter period of 3 months with effect from November to January. And it's based on 20% of the average monthly profits, up to a total of approximately £1,900 or thereabouts per month. But anyway, those are just some quick highlights in terms of what's coming over the horizon. I'm sure there'll be others coming through. But to give you a little bit more sort of feel for the business engagement side, our key appointee there, as I mentioned, Patrick Cole, has been working very hard with businesses in Pitsea, Billericay, Wickford and Basildon. There's been lots of weekly Zoom call meetings, personal visits where possible, email exchange and phone calls, and lots of social media channels. We've been leading on the creation of a new Basildon Business Town Centre group. It's a bit conceptual at this stage, but Patrick's been engaged with the likes of the operators of Eastgate Shopping Centre in Basildon, to establish that facility. But he's also been in discussions with Billericay Town Council to identify how business-to-business communications could be improved to help create a more formal network accordingly. He's also been establishing and improving rapport with the high street businesses in Basildon, Wickford, Pitsea and Billericay. with a view to providing individual support and signposting as well. So things like, how can we help you on the business rates? How can we help you in terms of Go Trade interventions, grant applications, that sort of thing. Also, through the Basildon Business Forum, we've been developing a live database of town centre businesses, and that's going to be very useful and helpful downstream, because it'll help us with not only showcasing, for example, the regen strategy and consultations that we recently undertook, but other similar things, because we don't and haven't had that level of detail in the past. We've also been working with Things Made Public to support various town centre initiatives, such as Basildon On Consortium. And we've also been improving the council's rapport with local business groups within the Pitsea Market, BTCM, who manage and run the car parks and public forum areas within Basildon, Eastgate and Wickford Market Traders. With regard to the recent grant action, we've had communications very recently with MHCRG, and we're sort of revising those terms with a view to seeing if we can get some further funding to support some new outputs, things such as developing a public health web platform, which in the long term could also host information content on local business groups. Also the creation of 3 promotional videos, which under the funding would focus on public health guidance and promote on the interventions. We're also looking to secure installation of footfall counting technology in Basildon Town Centre. And again, something that we haven't had, but we could roll that out hopefully into the other high streets. It's a bit pioneering for the council, but it will help with a source of key data that we could utilise downstream. Also continuing to promote the council Shop Local, Shop Safe campaign. And you may be aware, but my fellow ED, Paul Brace, has been working on relocating the Wickford Market in tandem with Patrick Cole. And that's been involving discussions with ECC and the highways. Also, we're trying to look at opportunities within Wickford on other alternative sites, even if it's in the short term on a temporary basis, to try and assist with that. So those are just some highlights, Chair, members, in terms of what we're doing on an ED front regarding COVID. Happy to take any further questions that you may have.
Thanks so much. Very good, quick but good presentation. I know things are changing all the time, so appreciate giving us the update as it stands at the moment. I think Councillor Sargent indicated.
Thank you. Thomas, I'm pleased with the amount of, really pleased, I'm sure everyone is, with the amount of support that we're giving to the businesses, because they're absolutely vital. We cannot afford to lose any one of them. Just 2 minor questions. Is the council logging all of the help that, or recording all of the help that you're giving to the businesses? And what about the support for the charities? You know, those that, because there's charities like Kathy's. I'm not talking about Kathy's, but there's charities that use lots of volunteers, and there are many volunteers that are, you know, community centres, all sorts, that are running things. And are we supporting those as well? Thank you.
Yeah, no, welcome, Councillor Sargent. And yes, we are logging all of the assistance that is being provided, and as I say, the steer for grants and support of that nature. With regard to the charities, a lot of stores, bear in mind the parameters of the funding is to focus on supporting the high street. So we're governed by those parameters and have to work within that regime. But obviously there's a number of charities that are present on the high street, such as British Heart Foundation as an example. And obviously we are supporting those that are present within the high street and trying to lend assistance and give them a steer on many of those areas that I've outlined earlier. So yes to both, but within the confines of the high street currently. Councillor Sargent.
Thanks, Tomasz. I mean, just to add on that briefly, I mean, obviously in terms of the help we're giving to businesses, inevitably we have to record all of that because most of it is government money and has to be recorded. And what I would say on top of that is that the Revs and Ben's team have done a great job because we have given out pretty much what we've been allocated. However, unlike some people, we took a little bit longer, which we might have got a little bit of criticism initially, but that was because we were actually checking the credentials, shall we say, of certain businesses, because again, vast majority of businesses behaved utterly properly, but where there's an advantage, there's always people who are prepared to take advantage. So so I think the team did a great job on that. And what I would say in terms of helping charities and voluntary organisations, yes, very much so. I was at the opening of the new Motivated Minds Centre in Basildon, the Eastgate Centre last week. And again, Basildon, without going into too much detail, Basildon Council has been fundamental in helping make that happen, and it's great because I'm sure Councillor Sargent and others know the work they do, how vital it is, particularly at the moment, but generally. And if you haven't seen that space already, please go and have a look. You'll be very welcome. It's what they deserve, basically. Anyway, on that, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we all recognise that COVID has caused some unprecedented challenges, not just for retail and town centres, but for businesses across the board. And I don't know about you, but for many years it's been said that the internet is going to take over an awful lot of retail sales. And I think we're actually seeing an acceleration of that trend. You've only got to look at the number of white vans around that are dropping off parcels, whether they're sign written or not, to see that that's something that's happening. And that then leads me directly to the town centres. One is there is the issue around can retail survive? And if I look at Wickford, obviously, like Councillors Brockman and Jeffrey, Wickford is right on my doorstep, so I notice it more often. But if you start looking at the premises up there, WH Smith, never see many customers in there, and they've already said they're going to close stores across the country. Peacocks is part of Edinburgh Woolen Mill, which has said it's going to close stores across the country. And they're not unique. I just picked them out because they've been in the news recently. And the question is, if they go, what can be done with those premises? Both of them are substantial premises. At one time, Smith's used to be a supermarket. So, you know, it's a significant size. Should we actually be now prepared to talk to, and I don't know who the landlord is for Smith's, but should we be talking to those landlords about what if, when these premises, or if these premises come empty? And it's not just the bigger ones, there's a number of smaller units come empty. The Greengrocers has disappeared in the Ladygate Centre. I've seen an email tonight saying that Cafe Copper that had closed is becoming another Indian takeaway. I'd rather have that than have it empty, but I think we've probably got too many Indian takeaways in the town. So I think we need to think about not just planning during the crisis, but we need to think about post-COVID planning, and how we're going to manage that and how we can benefit, or how the borough can benefit, but our provincial town centres in particular. Wickford is a challenge. On the market, I've been working at County Hall with it, and I had a meeting a few days ago. Progress is being made, and I believe it will be back in the high street in the near future. There are a couple of final obstacles to overcome, but you know, we are still talking to people about it, and it's all but there now. So I don't know whether we can get it there for Christmas or not. We might need to come in for Thomas's assistance. But when do we want to bring it in? If we're still suffering from COVID, or what seems increasingly likely, a heavier tier of lockdown than we have now. So it's a really challenging time, whatever route we go. The only other thing which I would highlight again, and it was touched on both by Cathy and by Thomas, and that's the issue of fraud around COVID. There is a lot of money floating around from the government to support different services, quite rightly, and you can debate whether it's enough money, too much money, or not enough money. But in terms of the actual amounts available, they are massive. And I hear what Councillor McCurran said about the council being very careful at vetting applications for money, quite rightly, and I applaud that, so no issue with that. But some of these fraudsters are mighty clever, and I don't know how much is fraudulent, but it's something I think we need to be on our toes about. So, thank you, Jim.
Thanks. Before I go to Thomas, just say, Councillor Buckley, yeah, no, on that, as I alluded to earlier, I think our team, our Revs and Ben's team, were very good. Some of our councils, very close to us, shall I say, gave out all the allocation within days. So you've got to they're the ones you've got to worry about, I think. But I take your point. Eternal vigilance is a good thing, but I'm confident that our team were very on it, and also aware of history, etc., shall we say, of certain people when it comes to trying to claim for certain things. So, I'm very confident about that. I think the councillor makes a good point about what COVID has done with the high street in terms of the acceleration of what was already happening. The high streets, and it's not peculiar to Basildon or Wickford or Billericay, across the country, unfortunately, people are going to have a look at goods at a shop and then ordering them online cheaper. And we know this is happening, and the high street is suffering as a result. All I would say is that is part of the review of Basildon Town Centre, and I know aspects of it are unpopular in certain quarters, but the fact is the present retail offer doesn't make sense going forward, and I hope we all agree on that. So we need to think about how we develop the high street going forward. One last point I would say is that given a lot of the points Councillor Buckley has made, and I merely mentioned this, I'm still a little surprised and disappointed that the Conservative councillors didn't take up the offer to join the COVID-19 response and recovery working group, which is where we're addressing all these issues and trying to look forward and deal with them. I know that wasn't your personal decision, Councillor Buckley, but it is one that still disappoints me. Anyway, Thomas for a more detailed response.
Sure. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Buckley. I would just say it is a reflection of the times, and I think you both you and the Chair have sort of highlighted the point of that acceleration. I think the key point that is coming to mind, and certainly if we use Basildon Town Centre Regen strategy as the key example, what it highlights is there is an increasing shrinkage of the retail offer, not just in Basildon but nationally as well. We've seen that impact on some major centres in the region, which are even more significant. But I think what it does provide is a range of opportunities, and what we're hoping through the Regen strategy is that it becomes a bit more of a livable place, and it is and develops a more evening economy. And granted that maybe there's certain types of food and beverage outlet may not be the most appealing or appropriate, but I think if you can get a blend and a range where you've got a livable town that is not closing from 5 o'clock or 5:30 in the evening, which is quite a traditional time. But then you have more of an evening economy supporting. That can only be a good thing. And I think what we're minded to try and assist all councillors with is not only just focusing on this sort of Basildon town centre, but trying to sort of apply those principles and further regen opportunities across the rest of the towns as well. Langdon is a perfect example of how that is being redesigned to provide a wider and more flexible sort of range of offer. So if we can do that, and we are in various discussions and approaches in Wickford, we would look to try and apply those same principles. And I think if you just look at the charter and the guiding principles that we are establishing for Basildon Town Centre, and we roll those out and apply those to all the other towns, you can see how we could work in a more sort of collaborative and cooperative way with developers and landlords to achieve a better result for everyone concerned. So just some general observations and comments there, Chair and Councillor Buckley, just to assist.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Tom.
if I could
Councillor
briefly
Buckley,
come
do you want
back
to come
on
back?
that,
We've got Councillor
Chairman.
Davis as well. So, sorry?
Yeah, if I could just briefly come back on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, certainly, you're aware that we started off a regeneration package many years ago now when I was leader, so it's too long ago, I'm afraid. Yeah, the aims for the town centre, and it was also modelled over to Langdon and Pitsea, was to try and change what was on offer in the town centre itself. We disagree with the detail of what you have in mind, but the concept of bringing a nighttime economy and a leisure economy into the retail, or what we've known as the retail centre, is something that's a positive. Our issue is around the detail and what else you're doing there. I'll leave it at that because that's not a debate for this committee, but certainly the thought process is right. The conclusions, I would suggest, are wrong.
Okay, well, as you say, it's not really one for this committee, but I appreciate, you know, there is some agreement, albeit not across the piece, shall we say. Okay, but no, I appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. It's a slightly different change of tack. You mentioned things made public. Obviously, they're big cultural organisations helped Basildon in the past. Touched upon this Basildon. Wondered if you could elaborate on that. I know we won a grant for the arts in Basildon, over £1 million for the arts. I just wondered if you had any more information on going forward, what things made public are doing at the moment.
Thomas, I hope
Chairman, no, Councillor Jeffrey's been cut off. If the officers could try and reconnect him.
Okay. Right. Also, I think maybe just a few connectivity issues. Thomas, could you hear that? Because I was struggling a bit.
I think I got the gist. I think Councillor Davis was seeking some further detail on the arts and grants. I don't have that level of detail immediately available for this evening, but I can certainly be able to furnish Councillor Davis with that and other members, as my colleague has probably got a closer handle on that. But we were in discussions with it in our senior sort of management team. So I am aware of the, it's a sizable grant that has been secured. It's a case of where and how that is being applied. Then I'll get the details for Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check you can hear me clearly now? I think it might be a headphone problem.
Yeah, that's better. I mean, we could just about hear you, but you're a little bit in and out. But yeah,
I think it's these dodgy headphones I've had. I'm not going to use them anymore.
Where'd you get them from, eh?
I don't know.
I don't think. Have we got Councillor Jeffrey back, by the way?
He was back briefly. I let him back into the meeting, but unfortunately he's dropped off again.
Oh, right, okay. I'm sure, Anne, you'll continue your efforts to get him back. We do have these problems from time to time. I don't think anyone else is indicating, so if not, can we move on? I mean, if it turns out Councillor Jeffrey did have a burning issue, we could always return to it. I'll be use my discretion on that one. I think the next item is the advice store continuation. I knew I'd messed that up. You know what I mean. And it's you again, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'll share my screen, and again, I'm just going to utilise a very brief presentation within about 5 minutes or thereabouts, just to sort of give the highlights of the report that you have before you, which I'm taking as read that everybody's had the opportunity to read it and look at it. So I'll just draw on some of the key cognitive points and then take any questions at the end of that. So if I can share my screen, if there's any problems on this, I'm sure Anne will just jump into the rescue and she'll already load up the copy that I furnished her with earlier. But I'll try with my screen in the first instance, Chair. So, can everybody see that?
Yes, that's worked,
Yep.
Thomas. Perfect.
Well, there you go. I've actually learned something for a change. So there you go. I'll whiz on. Just a quick background to the advice store, its current position, and I just want to highlight the future funding model, which is why we're bringing this to your attention. It's also because this needs to be washed through this committee prior to the budget setting, which will go in front of P&R in due course. So I just wanted to get members' views on this item, which is quite an important one for the council per se. So just moving on, a quick background for you all. We opened up the store in January 2019, and it has been a key one-stop shop for support, as you can see, regarding employment and training. I've got a slide next which will show you an example of the types and numbers of referrals, but we have received somewhere in the region of over 3,000 from people who have been looking for support through employment, education and training. You can see how the key benefits of this will be linked into, particularly once the college opens and they get the new intake coming in early in the new year as the building's close to completion. And I think that is the timetable that the college is working to. It has received a youth hub status, and we have co-location there from the Department of Works and Pensions work coaches. So it is very, very good in that respect, and it is a key, I'd say, a piece of armory more than a plank in our strategy for addressing rising unemployment. And despite COVID, we have got it back up and running, and we have it in operation 3 days a week, Tuesday to a Thursday, as that's when the majority of their inquiries are coming through. I just want to share this quick slide with you. This is fairly recent, around about mid-September this year. It gives you a little bit of a view in terms of how many people have enrolled in which authority, how many have withdrawn, how many have then become work ready, how many have then subsequently been employed as well. And it just gives you a little bit of a sort of a view there if you compare Basildon in particular with the likes of Southend and Thurrock, because I would view those as being sort of fairly comparable centres. And it just gives you a feel in terms of how many we're getting through the system and how many we are actually landing in with employment as well. Current position, we obviously are utilising members' funding commitments, and we have that projecting and supporting the operations up until around about May next year. The current lease expires around about September, so we've got a little bit of a gap between that period. The post is currently vacant, but again, we're fully aware of the MTFS shortfalls that we are all trying to address, and therefore we're just sort of highlighting, well, we're exploring a number of redeployment options to see whether or not we can avoid having to sort of fund that post if we can. But I think whilst there's a £60,000 funding required for the following year in particular, this is the point that I'm just trying to sort of highlight, that, you know, that gap starts to increase on a year-on-year basis. Not substantial, but it starts creeping up. And I know that this is a fundamentally important service that we provide, and it's something even more in demand as a result of COVID rather than less. And to give you sort of a little bit of a flavour and an idea of the funding projection, my last slide is just to show you what the shortfall is. And the burning question, I'm sure, is on your lips is, well, why is there a shortfall? And essentially it's because, as a result of COVID, we're not holding as many training sessions from the various training providers. They're not hiring and utilizing the space as much as they normally would. And that's why we're having a sort of reduction and a shortfall in the income that we're receiving. However, our rent, etc., and overheads are fairly fixed. And therefore, that's why you have that rising cost, as you see, for each of the years. So it's just to sort of give you an indication there of where the gap is, what we're trying to do about it, and we're hoping to try and address that utilising other systems and opportunities within the organisation and seeing whether we can redeploy people. But I just want to sort of make you aware of what potential funding gap could be. And obviously it's something that would need to be highlighted in your budget setting as a service committee chair. So that's it. Happy to take any questions, and I'll come off the screen if I can, and I'll stop sharing accordingly. Stop share. There we go. Okay.
Thanks very much, Tomasz. Yeah, I can see a couple of people indicating. Thank you. Yeah, just like to say, you know, appreciate the presentation there. What we're trying to do with this is be absolutely transparent. There is a gap of funding which couldn't have been envisaged because, you know, we didn't know we were going to have a global pandemic. It's, you know, a significant gap, but it's not huge. But what I would say is that the work that the Advice Store does is absolutely crucial and will become even more important in the coming months, possibly the coming year or two, actually. And I hope people will recognise that. One of the things that struck me, and I appreciate, Tomasz, the speed you went through that was very, I'm very grateful for, but there was a great slide there. And I think, you know, far be it from me to sort of score points over a neighbouring authority, but if you looked at the slide that Thurrock and Southend were on, particularly Thurrock, in terms of getting in people, young people and people generally, employment ready and into employment, there was a massive difference between us and Thurrock, and I think there's a very obvious reason for that. Anyway, I think I normally go to Councillor Sargent first because she's very quick off the mark, but I think on this occasion, Councillor Buckley might have just beat her to it.
I don't think I did actually, Chairman, but I don't mind whether I go first or second. Just a couple of observations and a question, if I may. You know, I don't think anybody doubts the value of support that this sort of operation can provide. Just on the report, it said that the Advice Stores had over 3,000 referrals. I think that was referred to in Tomasz's presentation as well. Are they referrals coming from other agencies, or are they self-referrals? Because whilst both categories are obviously welcome and wanted to come to this sort of agency, I just wonder whether people that don't know what it does really could be encouraged to make use of it for their benefit as well as the benefit of the community. The second point I wanted to ask about was the lease, which Tomasz mentioned runs till September next year. Those premises, I would imagine are relatively expensive. Moving it to an alternative location, I appreciate that the comment in the options side of the paper is not about reducing cost, but where would you want to move it for it still to be effective? Because if you're going to have a walk-in centre, I would have thought it needs to remain in the town centre somewhere. Where the somewhere is, I'm open-minded about, but I think a lot of the people that are likely to use it probably are not fans of officialdom, and coming into the council or job centre plus is somewhere where they don't perceive those agencies as their friends. And I think we just need, I think it needs some promotion, I think, the right promotion, but we need to think about, should we extend that lease? If so, should we do it long term or on a license, or should we look for somewhere else? Because as we said earlier, there are going to be numerous opportunities in and around all of our town centres. I actually think this should stay in Basildon, I'd hasten to add, but perhaps Thomas may have had some thoughts about that for the future.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Buckley. Happy to respond, Chair. I think the referrals have been from a combination of sources, Councillor Buckley, as you've sort of suggested. It's both agency and self-referrals, which made up that number. And just before I forget, Chair, yes, very keen observation from that earlier slide as I rapidly cantered through. But yes, I think what it demonstrates is Basildon is hitting the ground fairly hard and supporting very well. Coming back to the lease and alternative possible options, as you'll appreciate, its location there is very prominent, and it's something I'm mindful of wearing one of my service hats as economic development as well as regeneration. You can imagine its prominence both in relation to where the market is, everybody gathering and walking past there. It's on the main drag to the rail station. You can see its linkage with the college, which is going to be open very soon in close proximity. And you've got a number of developments potentially coming forward in close proximity to that. So it's a very well signposted and showcased location. And that's why the team viewed that was a good space to be. I think to safeguard the council, short-term lets are always a favourable option, and I'm sure the landlords would be keen to negotiate a fair price, and us utilising our sort of property experience would make sure that we do achieve the best benefit for the council. But I wouldn't want us to put ourselves into a backwater location unnecessarily. I think the only other option I would consider is perhaps in the BAS Centre itself, because we could utilise our space there and perhaps save some money. But again, we would move away from our sort of current prominent location to there. But it's certainly something that we have thought about, and it comes back to how we see the future use of the Basildon Centre in the long term. But I think in the meantime, short-term arrangements could always be discussed with the landlords unless an alternative, better location were identified. But we'll always keep an eye out. But there's always that cost for refit as well, and then it's also trying to ensure all the other operators would be willing to go there. So we've got a good space there currently. And I think if we can ride the storm, at least until the lease comes up for renewal, we could always take a longer term view from that point.
Thanks. I think, can I just say something? I think you make a very good point about the location of the advice store at the moment. It is in a good location. It is neutral, if you like. It's not formally part of the council or the job centre or anything else, and I think that's a great benefit. And the footfall around there is very good, as we know. So all of that is great. So hopefully long may it continue. That said, as we've seen all sorts of challenges. I would like it to continue there. I'll be honest, that would be my preferred option. However, we also do realise we have space and like to have space in the BAS Centre. If there was a considerable saving to be made, and we could overcome the problems that you've rightly identified, then it'd be wrong not to look at that. But at this point, my preferred option would be to keep it where it is, because I think it works really, really well.
I would agree with that, Chairman. But if it does have to relocate, I think it probably would not be appropriate to put it into the BAS Centre, simply because of the, if you like, the attachment to the establishment, as some of the clients may see it. So I would hope that we can get a deal of some sort with the current landlord. But of course, I'm also minded that you have plans for that area as well. So I don't know if or when those plans will go through, and if or when they may get delivered, which could also have a bearing on it, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, none of us know that at the moment. But no. I'm quite enjoying hearing Councillor Buckley talk about the establishment. That's quite interesting.
Well, I include you in it, Chairman.
God, you'll be talking about the Liberal elite next. God, yeah. Anyway, yeah. But no, I do think it's an important point, and I think what Councillor Tomasz is saying is right. Is that we've got to be, wherever it is, it's got to work for the people of Basildon, and where it is at the moment works really, really well. And whilst I'd be like you, I'd be very reluctant to move it into the BAS Centre. What we've got to remember is there's a library there, and people come in and use the library. So but that's some way down the track. And I would, as I say, my preference is let's keep it where it is if we possibly can, because it works well there and it's doing a great job. So yeah. Anyway, sorry, Councillor Sargent.
Yes, thank you. I agree with the advice store, support it. I believe this was set up in a Conservative administration, and I'm pleased that it continues. It's just a shame that there's a shortfall in costs, and I do agree that the location is extremely good. Some questions for Thomas or whoever. Well, I've heard tonight that we are a service committee, and the recommendation is that we make provision for £60,000. Well, this committee has never had a budget. So that's one question. Does this committee, no, I've got some other questions so I'll ask them all and then you can answer. So I'm just saying now, have we now got a budget? With regard to funding, and is there any intention in the future to try and make it a bit more self-sufficient? Is there some co-funding with other partners that could well be supportive of this? Because this must be an enormous help to the DWP, because this is for young people and we need to get them trained and we need to get them employed. And do we know what the actual cost of the premise is, Thomas? And yeah, there's my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Do you want to deal with those?
Yes, I'll have a go, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sargent. Yeah, sorry, if I've alluded to something incorrectly, my apologies. But what I was trying to say is that this would need to be recommended or supported by this committee, and then referred as part of.
Sorry, Thomas, can I interrupt there? You haven't interpreted anything incorrectly. Whilst we don't have the biggest budget, and Joe Ray can help me out if I need be, we have had budget issues before with our place, and so it's not true that we don't have a budget at all. But clearly what we're trying to do with this is flag up an issue that was part of a different committee, and to be transparent about it, and make sure that the finances are all ticked off, so that we know what the issue is and how we resolve it.
Yes.
So can you just answer that question? Does this committee have a budget? Because the other committee didn't, because they got money from council. So are we getting money from council, the council budget, or have this committee got a budget? And if we have, how much is it?
No, we do not have a budget as such. Joe, do you want to come in and clarify matters?
Sorry, yeah. I mean, it's the same as you say. What happened with our place? Obviously, we can make a case-by-case representation for funding for specific things in the same way that members of the administration can on a sort of case-by-case basis. So no, we don't have a standing budget. What I'm not sure about was whether there was anything that should have come across as a response to certain functions coming across from a different committee. But I think it's something that would be looked at in the new municipal year as well.
Thank you, Joe.
Can I just come back on that one question? Thank you for that, Joe. It's just that the way the recommendation reads is the committee agrees to make provision. If we don't have a budget, we can't. How can we make provision?
Tomasz, does that need to be amended or not?
Well, my understanding from the Section 151 officer is that we need to secure an agreement from this committee to then be referred as part of the budget setting in front of PNR and beyond.
So in other words, exactly the normal process. So in other words, the fact that we don't have a set budget is actually not.
So how can we agree to make provision? Because that would be wrong for us to agree to that if we've got no provision in the first place.
Tomasz, do you want to come in or not?
All I could say, Councillor Sargent, is it's to make the recommendation for that provision, and that has to go through PNR in the first instance. If it goes to full council after that, I can't comment. I can only comment that the next stage would be to go to PNR, which it would be set for the budget.
Thank you, Thomas. Can you answer my other questions, please? Thank you.
Sorry. That's what you're asking. Are there any other sources of funding that we can secure, and what is the full cost of the provision of that unit? The costs were and are as part of the slide that I showed earlier. I'm happy to sort of put that back up on screen, but essentially it shows the shortfall. So I can put that back up on screen if that would help, Councillor Sargent. But with regard to finding other sources, yes, we're always horizon scanning, and I would hope that as a result of us being identified as a supporting training hub, employment hub, we would then hopefully secure some additional funding when those relevant funding opportunities come forward through government. At the moment, as you appreciate, they're quite fluid at this point in time as a result of COVID. But we're always scanning for any opportunities of funding that we can secure downstream. But if you'd like me to highlight that slide in the meantime, Councillor Sargent, I'll go back to the presentation and put that particular slide up on screen.
No, don't worry, Thomas. Thank you very much.
Yeah, would you like that, Councillor Sargent?
Sorry, no, that's okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just give me a second. I think there might be an easy way of resolving this to everyone's satisfaction for once. Let me just have a look.
Yeah, and it just needs revising slightly. Say recommends that PNR make provision, and then it would read correctly.
Well, I think it just needs to say that the committee agrees to make provision for £60,000 to support the continuation of the advice store for next 2021-22 financial year, which will be included in the budget.
Well, as we haven't got a budget to do it, the right way to do it would be to say that the committee agrees to recommend to Policy and Resources that it makes provision of 60,000 to support the and that's all it is. It's having it correct rather than incorrect. If you have it as it is, I'll vote against it.
Yeah, no, okay.
I'll vote for it.
I'm happy with that if the officers are happy with that.
Yeah,
that's fine, Chair.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree.
Okay, so Councillor Buckley, that's from you, and it's being seconded by Councillor McGurran, yes?
Yeah, unusually,
first time ever.
Something from Councillor Buckley in a cross-party accord. Isn't this nice? Yeah, that's fine.
Well, I got there in the end.
No, thank you. Thank you. But all I would say, Councillor Sargent, is the whole point of this was to make the fact there was a potential funding gap transparent and to deal with it. You know, that was the point of it. So thank you if you've slightly amended the phraseology, but the whole point was that was the intention anyway. Councillor Davis.
Just to help, sometimes it helps to read the risk management implications table. If you look at the threats on page 13, it reads, failure to approve the financial support will result in the closure of the advice store caused by the inability to sustain services. This will reduce the support to residents who are vulnerable or less able to gain meaningful support. And then the proposed action to reduce the further threat, the committee agrees to make provision for £60,000 to support the continuation of the advice store for the 21-22 financial year, and that will result in a low target level of proposed action, so the threat will be low after that. And then that's a nice, neat summary of what is needed and what we're voting on.
I read that, but the recommendation needs to read right, otherwise we would vote against it.
Point taken, Councillor Sargent, but you tend to vote against most things anyway. What I would say is, I think we've got a wording now we're agreed on, but the key thing is to keep the advice store going because it's essential at this present moment in time. And if we've come to a better form of wording, all well and good. But what I would say is, members do get this agenda a week at least. I think it was more than a week in advance. Now, Councillor Sargent has been critical of not seeing things in advance enough, but you've had this for a week. The officers are there waiting for any comments. I'm there waiting for any comments so that we can change things. Because, 20 minutes of tonight, we could have dispensed with. Sorry, Councillor Brockman is about to clearly tell me that she hasn't seen hers, but anyway.
I got mine this morning.
Oh, sorry. To be fair, the printed version, which was an issue with, but we all had an electronic version. Correct me if I'm wrong, Anne. Over a week ago. Now I know sometimes with electronic versions, it's not the biggest bloody agenda, is it? So I've got a council one that arrived today. It's about 450 frigging pages. But this one is sort of manageable online. So. Please, if there's issues ahead of the meeting, if you don't want to talk to me, fine. Talk to Joe, talk to Anne, talk to whoever, so we can flush these things out in advance. Because we're not trying to hide
no committee
anything.
member can change a recommendation. A recommendation needs to be changed at a committee. It's not for me to change recommendations over the phone with an officer or yourself.
No, it's not, but you can flag up the problem and then we can deal with it much quicker. That's all I'm saying. Can we move to the vote unless anyone else wants to come in? Can we move to the vote? Yes, no? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So it is as amended. Anne, have you got the word in as amended?
Okay, so the committee agrees to recommend to P&R to make provision for £60,000 to support the continuation of the advice store for the 2021 financial year.
First off, everyone happy with that before we go to the vote? That's as what we agreed, yes?
Should be 21-22, Mr. Chairman.
I thought that's what you said, that Anne said, wasn't it? No?
No, I think Anne said 2021.
It is 2021-22.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks, Sue. Okay, go to the vote. Councillor Brockman?
Yeah, go up for.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley? Can't hear you either. Councillor Buckley, we can't hear you.
Yeah, since I altered it, I'd better vote for it. So yeah,
since you proposed to alter it, yeah, thank you. Councillor Davis?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey? Councillor Jeffrey?
Have we lost him again?
I think we may have lost him again, yeah. He looks deep in thought, though. That's right. Okay.
He's not moving.
No, he's not. Right. So my vote for Councillor Sargent.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll try and get Councillor Jeffrey back. Obviously, his vote is a little academic, but we'd.
I think we have him back now.
Councillor Jeffrey, was that in favour?
Yes, it was. I've had terrible trouble with my connection, so
I gather, but thank you for bearing. Yeah, thank you for bearing with us. Appreciate it. So that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. We got there in the end. Right. So next item, I think, is a welcome to Jim, our new head of economic development, on a report on the Kickstart scheme. I think we're all quite excited about this. Again, difficult times, but out of difficult times come challenges, and hopefully we respond to them. And I think there is potential here for us to help our young people out in a way and avoid a lost generation. And I may talk about that a little bit later, but hopefully not. Anyway, Jim, welcome to the committee. To those who don't know him, this is our new head of economic development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I'll share my screen. Again, hopefully this will work. Everybody see that okay? Thumbs up. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I'm going to outline a little bit about the Kickstart scheme and talk about the scale of the challenge perhaps in front of us, a little bit of detail about what the scheme's about, how we can get involved as an authority, what competencies we need to get involved, what further steps need clarifying, and then next steps in terms of pushing forward if you're minded to recommend that the authority steps forward as a representative organisation. So in terms of the scale of the challenge, we can see that COVID-19 is impacting on a whole range of sectors, and the impact's likely to deepen as the furlough scheme comes to an end. The Institute of Public Policy Research estimates that an extra 620,000 young people between the ages of 18 and 24 will be unemployed at the end of the year, on top of the 410,000 already unemployed, bringing the total to over 1 million. And that's a higher number of unemployed people than we've seen in the last two recessions. So, the scale of the impact is quite considerable. What is the scheme? It's a £2 billion fund to create quality placements for young people aged 16 to 24. Because of the speed that the DWP is rolling out the programme, some of the detail is still emerging. So we're finding out a lot of new information on a daily basis about how the scheme will run and how it will operate. But basically, it provides funding of up to 25 hours of national minimum wage, depending on the age of the young person at the time of the placement. And it pays also for the NI and auto enrolment pension contributions for the young person. and also a £1,500 payment for each employer to help the employer provide wraparound support, travel expenses, and generally make provision for the young person coming into the job. This is the challenging bit, that anybody bidding in order to try and apply for the scheme must have a minimum of 30 placements. And this is effectively what's being termed as a representative organisation. So the recommendation is that we as an authority, or the suggestion is that we as an authority apply to be a representative organisation to bid for 30 placements, both on behalf of the authority and on behalf of small businesses in the area who are looking to bring young people into their organisation. In return for that, the authority would get £300 per placement for representative organisations to cover their costs in doing that work, and funding will in effect be a grant award to the representative organisation. As I said, more detail will emerge on representative organisations. There are a number that have put their name down already to be a representative organisation, and DWP is working through the processes on how that will work. The target is to create nationally 270,000 quality placements. So you can work out with 30 minimum each, then there's a fair number of representative organisations likely to step into the fray. It will need bids from now to December 2021. Not likely to see the first placements until mid-November, and the money that will be awarded if we choose to progress with this will be awarded on the basis of the bid that we put forward in terms of the number of placements that we're applying for. Once it's agreed, DWP will work with us as an organisation and refer young people to the end employers and try and match them into suitable jobs. And a representative organisation will be responsible for managing the payments to third parties. Last couple of slides. In terms of the competencies that we need to get involved, we've built a partnership with Revs and Bens, because obviously they've done such a great job in handing out grants to businesses that it's a core competency of theirs. So we're saying that we'll work closely with Revs and Bens on managing this programme, and also HR and organisational development, because again, the authority itself will probably be able to identify a number of placements itself within the council that could potentially host a placement. The proposal is also for us to partner with Brentwood Council to deliver the programme. We're in advanced talks with them about collaboration, and obviously the Revs and Bens service is already working closely with them, and this is just an extension of that, naturally. In terms of what further needs clarifying, the precise role of the representative organisations needs clarifying, what checks are expected of employers, what the audit requirements may be, and the process for reimbursing employers the salary costs and NI and pension. So some of the detail is still not wholly clear, but if you're minded to approve the recommendation in the report, we'd then go out and communicate and market to build the 30 placements. We've got a number of interested parties and people who've already said that they would be interested in working with us to bid for a job placement. But once we get up to the 30, we then apply to the Kickstart scheme and submit our bid. And that's it. Thank you very much. If anybody's got any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thanks, Jim. I can see one or two people indicating already. Yeah, no, thank you for that presentation. And I also know that Jim and other members of his team have been working really hard on this, because obviously it was quite a short time frame, and is still a short time frame to get a lot done, and like a lot of government announcements. And this is not a political point. It's like they announce the project, and then the detail comes later, which for councils makes it difficult to go, well, what can we do, what can't we do? I think Jim's done a great job on catching up with identifying it, and I think there's a lot of potential in this scheme for us if we use it correctly. And like I say, I think we have had previous lost generations of young people, and we don't want to see that again, and we definitely don't want to see that in Basildon. And I think if we utilise this scheme and other projects, then hopefully we can go a long way to avoiding that. But we are facing challenges. I think, okay, I'll let you go first last time, Councillor Buckley. So Councillor Sargent this time.
Thank you. As much as I support Kickstart, I don't have the confidence reading through the report that Basildon is best placed to be the representative organisation. I personally feel that Essex County Council would be a good organisation because they're fully equipped to carry this out and they've got all the infrastructure already in place. So I feel it would be best placed to sit with Essex County Council rather than the Borough Council that the report lacks confidence, which I don't feel that that there is too much. I think that it's too much of a burden on the council from what I'm reading, and I didn't hear the officer, talk about the confidence, because once you start a program like this, we need to help these people and they need to get the support. It's not there at the moment, I don't believe. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Sargent. I'm sorry, I'm not looking for a row. I really am not. But I feel that's an extraordinary comment, that you don't have faith in your own council to administer a scheme like this. Absolutely off the scale. Anyway, but the point of it is that yeah, Essex County Council will be doing it. Southend Council will be doing it. Lots of people will be doing it. We're talking about, and I like this scheme. I despite the fact that it's a Conservative government scheme, I'm on the record here as saying I think there's a lot of positives about it. One of the things that is problematic about it is it's a minimum of 30 placements. However, the report in front of you says, yeah, we'll get 30 placements, and we will get 30 placements. Hopefully we'll get significantly more. And I think from talking to Jim, that this report was produced about a week ago. I think that the numbers for Basildon Council of 6 has already increased, and hopefully will increase more. In terms of our partner organisations, there's lots going on there. I mean, come on, Councillor Sargent, have a bit of ambition for Basildon, please. Come on. Jim, do you want to come in?
No, I think the only thing I'd add is that, we're working, as you rightly pointed out, very hard on wraparound support, making sure that we've got in place a whole programme of partners from National Careers Service through to the Advice Store, to a number of other partners in the Advice Store, to make sure that every young person is supported appropriately. I think the only thing I would say is that I think the idea of the government trying to create the target of 30 and have a national target of 270,000 is built on the principle of there being lots of players in the market, lots of people in play to try and grouse beat young people and grouse beat employers into taking action. So I'm very confident that the team that we've pulled together to do this is well equipped to do it, and I think that the idea of having more than one provider in any particular local area will drive up demand for the scheme.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I think we've got a couple of people indicating. Again, what I would say is, we've got a crisis here. Let's be honest. Young people, and I include, shouldn't get personal possibly, but my daughter had 3 jobs 6 months ago. She now doesn't have any jobs. I mean, actually, she didn't have jobs then because she was supposedly self-employed. Therein lies a tale. But, you know, young people are at the hard end of this. And I want us as a council to do everything we can to make sure young people are given all the opportunities they can be. Now, listen, that sounds a bit hard. The Kickstart scheme, 6 months. It's not perfect, and I don't blame the government for that. That's okay, but it's an opportunity, and we should be taking advantage of that opportunity, and we should be utilising it as much as possible for our young people. And one of the things in the report is it's meaningful work experience. It's not just like go and make a cup of tea. It's meaningful, well thought out work experience. So even if there's no apprenticeship at the end of it, no job at the end of it, you can then have on your CV, I did this, I learned this, that, and the other, and I'm now employable. And that's the point. Right. Sorry, I think Malcolm, sorry, Councillor.
Can I just quickly come back there, Chairman?
Of course you can.
I said I am very much in favour of the Kickstart scheme, but I just don't feel the confidence. I feel that Basildon should be working with Essex County Council on this, because I know they've got all of the infrastructure, and I do believe it will become a great success. But that is my opinion. Well, I am not doubting the scheme. I think
well, we are working with Essex County Council in all sorts of ways, despite what you might think. But given that we only have to have a minimum of 30, again, I think it exhibits a massive lack of confidence and ambition on your part that you don't think Basildon Council can be a gateway for that. I don't understand what your point is, but that's not the first time, is it? Anyway, Councillor Malcolm Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm going to agree with you and disagree with you. The scheme, I think, is an excellent scheme for what it is. And I accept it's an interim scheme because of the crisis we find ourselves in nationally at the moment. Where I'm going to start to disagree with you is whether Basildon should actually be the conduit for the scheme. And if you actually read through the report, the recommendation is the council basically applies to become a representative organisation. Further through the report, it says we're well tied in with negotiations with Brentwood Council to work together on it. Well, that's contradictory to the recommendation for a start. I do think that, like Councillor Sargent, we should be working closely with Essex. Essex has already got the numbers. It's a certainty that the scheme will happen. And I think if you work with Essex County Council and probably with Brentwood and indeed some other boroughs which are talking to Essex at the moment, and indeed some of the business organisations which are working with Essex at the moment, I think you can actually provide more opportunities for Basildon people than by trying to go it alone. Unfortunately, the history of Basildon Council has always been an attitude under Labour administrations that the only organisation that can deliver anything, whatever it happens to be, is Basildon. That's absolute rubbish. And I will formally move that in accordance with option 3, which is on page 18, that the council work in partnership with another representative organisation, in this instance Essex County Council, together with other business and local government partners in order that we can offer this service in conjunction with those partners. I'm sure.
I'll second that.
Yeah, Councillor Sargent will second it.
Well, thank you, Councillor Buckley.
I think,
can I just say, I now realise why you declared an interest in being an Essex County Councillor.
Well, if I can continue, Chairman, it happens that a local member, Councillor Tony Ball, has the portfolio responsible for it. I can assure you that Councillor Ball has Basildon's interest at the forefront of his mind. I appreciate you might be looking at £1,500 per job. What can we cream off it? Why don't you talk to Councillor Board or the office?
Sorry, Councillor Buckley, did I interrupt you there?
It's not just a financial
Can I
issue.
interrupt you there? Because you clearly haven't read the document, because actually we're not creaming off anything. Look at your other councils in Essex, look at Essex County Council, we are not creaming off anything. However, I think at this point it'd probably be useful to bring Jim back in to explain, because clearly there are people are not quite getting this, I think. But Jim, do you want to come in?
Yes, so the £1,500 is capable of being used by a representative organisation to deliver wraparound support.
Yeah.
And there are some authorities that are clearly using that money, as you've rightly described, in order to bolster their own service delivery and bolster their own service provision, and are not passing that money to the end employer in order to help the employer in these very challenging times. We've looked at this and we've said to ourselves, given the support that we know that's nationally already available, given the partners that are available to us in order to provide wraparound support, and the capabilities that we've got through the delivery of the advice store and through the employability support that we provide to young people already, we don't need to cream that money off the top, as you described. We don't need to make use that money to provide that, because there's plenty of already available free services. So we were, through our model, going to pass that money directly to an employer in order to strengthen the employer's financial position and ability to support the young person at this particular point in time. One of the primary reasons really why we were looking at being a representative organisation rather than necessarily going with a third party that was largely going to look towards using that to bolster their own services.
Well, if I may, John, even taking that at face value, working on a scheme with other authorities and other boroughs opens up an awful lot more opportunities with other employers. And I really think that by focusing just on Basildon, or maybe with Brentwood, if you go contrary to the recommendation, then you're actually saying, well, if E2V at Chelmsford, which is a high-tech firm that I know a little bit about, if they have an opportunity, is it going to come here? No, it's not. It's going to be in the pool. What I'm saying to you is you're depriving some of our people of the opportunity of looking wider afield. I would prefer that their jobs were all in the borough. No two ways about that. But the reality of it is that we do have some good quality jobs in the borough. We have some medium quality jobs, and we have some low quality jobs. But there is a bigger range of jobs outside the borough than there is inside, notwithstanding the number of jobs that we have here.
Councillor Buckley,
cooperating with Essex.
sadly, you're talking the borough down. You accuse other people of talking the borough down. That's exactly what you're doing. But to be clear, and I will stand to be corrected by Jim, who's the expert on this, people can apply outside of the borough or into the borough. People outside the borough can apply into the borough. If you, sorry, didn't probably explain that the best, but get my drift. So what we're saying is we want to grab this. We want to get good opportunities for young people in the borough. And, and if there are people outside the borough, we want that as well. What you're saying is just go into the amorphous mass that is Essex, and they'll sort it out for you, like they always do. Really, Councillor Buckley? Is that is that the recent history of Essex? Really? As Basildon residents wouldn't, pardon my language, urinate on Essex County Council if they were on fire, right? That's the truth. Eunice, you know that, don't you? They would not. So why on earth should we be going into Essex when we've got a perfectly formed plan here that has been well worked? And
it's not perfectly formed because you've got a contradiction in the report to the recommendation for a start.
Absolutely.
Really? Have we?
Yes, you have. Read it.
I don't appreciate, again, what's becoming a common factor here of officers being criticised for doing a good job. And again,
Criticise an officer.
if you've got a problem with it, why don't you raise it beforehand?
This is the place to raise it, not outside. The meeting is the place to raise it.
If there is a significant issue that needs to be addressed, you can raise it at any point. Anyway, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to start by saying I'm fully support the recommendations. I think Basildon Council is more than capable of progressing this in collaboration with Brentwood Council or not. At the moment, it's just an inquiry and we'll see how it goes. But we are an economic giant in Basildon, in Essex, and we have jobs that we can put these young people towards and to grow and be economically vibrant within Basildon. So that's a good thing. I would just like to point out in the risks section, it highlights the potential of a threat for employers to commit fraud to access the funding. If they want to access the funding, they commit fraud and resulting in the programme becoming discredited. I wondered if you could explain to me how the robust monitoring procedures would be in place to prevent that from occurring in the first place. Thank you.
Do you want me to come back, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, yes, please, Jim. Sorry.
I think as Councillor McGurran intimated that when we were giving out business grants, we put in place more robust processes than many others in order to ensure that the claims that were being made of us were legitimate. And so, again, I'm reliant on Revs and Bens and their processes for monitoring and ensuring that claims are appropriate and suitable. So whilst some of the detail of how that is going to work in practice is still emerging, there's a number of ways. One is through HMRC payroll declarations. The other one is asking for the employer to provide suitable fiduciary evidence. So pay slips and ensuring that there are bank statements and a variety of other documents that prove that they've still got the person in the employ. We'll also continue to maintain a relationship with the placement candidate through the wraparound support that we'll be providing. So we'll know when people are left. If people leave the employ of an organisation, we'll know that.
Thank you. That allays some of my fears. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think Councillor Jeffrey indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I'm broadly supportive of this scheme. I just wanted to make a few comments on page 16. It says a minimum of 25 hours per week for 6 months, but on one technical point, is it within the 25 hours a week, will we be providing the support to look for long-term work and the support with their CV and interview preparation, or is that the 25 hours per week is purely for employment, and then we're going to offer an additional section for that? And my next point, it was sort of related to Councillor Buckley in a sense that what I believe he was saying was about economies of scale, and that if we do it much larger, then it might be beneficial. But on the one point, it says the options available. It seems like we're probably trying to go for, it's on page 17 if anyone's looking. It might seem a bit better if we're looking to merge options 2 and 3, sort of the general gist of what we've been saying, and whether that can be reflected in the recommendation. But it's getting the most saying it's a minimum. We should be saying, can we get to 100, say, or more? And my question to the head of economic development, it says likely to be 5 or 6, and the chairman said it's more. I just would like to know what number is it now, or is it? I know you can't say precisely, but just sort of around there.
So in terms of the 25 hours a week situation, and I think in reality we'd be guided by employers in terms of their approach to supporting the individual for employment purposes for 25 hours a week. If they're a very committed employer that's very committed to ensuring that the individual gets the wraparound care and support that they require, then it might be that they are so committed that they're willing for that to take place within the 25 hours that the individual is employed for. There may be others who might say, well, actually, you're working for me for 25 hours, so I'd appreciate if you'll take the support in some other hours outside of the 25 hours. So we'll be guided, I think, by the employer in terms of whether it's within the 25 hours or outside the 25 hours. But what we will ensure is that they get a good quality wraparound support package. That's the first point. I think the point in terms of options 2 or 3, I come back to the point earlier that I think the government is looking for a good number of representative organisations in order to drive market demand for this. I don't think it's going to be, for want of a better description, one single solution provider across Essex that's going to drive the most demand for this, whether it's with their employers or whether it's with young people. It's a bit like, I think, the insurance broker market a little bit, that they're trying to create lots of little insurance brokers. And that's the business model that they've got for this. Because as I say, I think that way creates lots of little people out in the market banging the drum and trying to get people moving. So I think, again, that's why we're trying to recommend that we step up as a representative organisation. And the third question, in terms of the number of placements that the council might be able to bring forward itself, I know that there's a belief that there might be able to be a minimum of 6, but there are currently plans afoot within the authority for HR and OD to be talking to individual managers to see whether they've got some space themselves. So it's very difficult to tell you how many exactly or precisely are going to come forward at this point in time. I don't know whether Councillor McGurran, you picked up something different in terms of the absolute numbers within the authority, but I think it's difficult to estimate.
No, Jim, to be fair, I don't think that's clear at the moment. It's a work in progress, but I am confident it will be more than 6.
Can I come back, Chairman?
Of course you can, Councillor Jeffrey.
On one part, I think Councillor Davies mentioned one point. It's saying we're the de facto accountable body on one point. So if we go into a consortium of sorts, what arrangement will we have so that if we're in partnership with someone, that they too are accountable, so that it's not just us putting our neck on the line, unless it's been discussed elsewhere. That was just the point I wanted to pick up on.
Jim?
Yeah, so we're currently looking at developing a partnership agreement with Brentwood. So we'd have a partnership agreement with them, which would set out the terms and obligations and the responsibilities of both parties. And as far as employers are concerned, there'd be a memorandum of understanding with each employer as well. So there'd be agreements between the various organisations involved, which would, to some extent, spread the risk.
Sorry, I've just muted myself. Sorry, can you hear me now? On that, little bit of recent history, for those that don't know, during the COVID crisis, obviously Brentwood don't have the same revs and bends issues that we do, normally speaking. So Basil and Council worked closely with them on that, partnered with them on that. And as a result of that, partly as a result of that, I think the feeling is being a much smaller council, they're comfortable knowing what we did with that they can trust us with this, and rightly so, hopefully. Sorry, Councillor Sargent.
Eunice has been indicating before me.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry. That's very kind of you. I want to speak as somebody who's had a couple of businesses over time, and a few years ago we were in the position of employing a few people, and we actually went into getting apprentices working with us, and let's just say it wasn't the easiest journey that I've ever done. It would have been easier to get to the moon than it was to get through the job centre and get some apprentices. So I'm actually welcoming this. I really am welcoming this. I'm not saying I'm against Essex County Council joining in and all that, and I'm welcoming Brentwood, great. But what I will say is, in my position now, I'm still got a business, but I only employ myself and my husband. I work with a lot of businesses within the Basildon Borough, and I know that there's going to be a lot of businesses out there who are going to really want to take this offer up. So yeah, I'm behind it. That's it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brockman. Very brief and to the point. I appreciate that. I mean, I think one of the things that Jim may not be able to tell us at the moment, but is there is a lot of interest from other organisations already, other than Basildon Council. You know, and it might be inappropriate to talk about specifics, but I don't know if there's anything what you feel you can say about that, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting companies that we've got an inquiry from is a London-based ad agency that and design agency that is interested in taking 5 or 6 job placements from Basildon area, with a view to potentially setting up a potential remote office in time. They're not committing to do that in the immediate time, because they're clear that these 5 or 6 people could be remote working during the duration of their placement. But if things go to plan, then they're interested in building on that 5 or 6 staff cohort by potentially looking at a regional office. So there is an argument there that might not happen without Basildon stepping into play, perhaps.
Thanks, Jim. That's really interesting. I didn't actually know about that one, but that is fascinating, and again indicative that Basildon can do this itself with other people, hopefully, you know, supporting us and all the rest of it. Strange they didn't contact Essex County Council, but there you go. Anyway, I think we're probably time to put this to the vote. So, you know, all those in favour of the recommendation.
Sorry, Chair. Would you like to vote on the motion first from Councillor Buckley? Would you like me to read that out again?
Yes, please, Anne. Sorry, I forgot. We got carried away with ourselves. I forgot all about it. Go on. Let's have
Councillor Buckley, I think I caught it all, so please let me know if I've got any of it wrong. So I've put that Basildon Council work in partnership with another representative organisation, in this instance ECC, including other businesses and other local partners, to apply for funding.
That's correct, yeah.
And that was seconded by Councillor Sargent.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. If you weren't here, God knows what would have gone on. Anne, sorry, Councillor Brockman, that we're voting on the amendment, which was Councillor Buckley's amendment.
I'm abstaining.
Sorry?
I didn't really understand it, so...
Right. Can we repeat that then, please?
In words of one syllable, it means that we work with Essex, other authorities, business organisations promote the scheme on a bigger scale. That's what it means.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll go with that. What have I done? I've done something wrong.
You just voted for it. Are you going round, Chairman?
Councillor Brockman, you spoke against it and then you voted for.
Oh, well, yeah, you know what I mean. I'm getting confused. It's late, blimey. It's 9:30.
No.
Oh, you wait till we get to a budget meeting.
So, hang on. Sorry. Can we just start again and read out the motion again?
I'm not getting it.
No, Councillor Brockman, this is important. Yeah.
Sorry,
so we have to understand what we're voting on.
No mind for her.
And I'm getting.
No, I'm not. But she spoke against. She spoke against something, and then I don't believe.
She voted for it when as soon as Malcolm made it absolutely clear.
Well, he didn't make it absolutely. Can we hear the amendment again? Because I think there was some confusion because I'd lost track of the fact there was an amendment. Now, maybe that's my fault, but can we have the amendment in full so that everyone understands what's being voted on? Because clearly they didn't there. Thank you.
So it is that Basildon Council work in partnership with other representative organisations, in this instance, Essex County Council, including other businesses and other local partners, to apply for funding.
And can I just say there's the original amendment, the original proposal to come, but this is an amendment. Councillor Brockman.
I'm going to go back to my original statement, and I said that I was abstaining.
Okay, Councillor Buckley.
What?
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Jeffrey.
For.
I'm against. Councillor Sargent.
For.
The amendment appears to be carried. If I'm adding up right. Is Anne, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Given the amendment has been carried, does that mean we move to the original? No, we don't.
That is it.
That is it.
That's the decision. Or the
That is the decision. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. Move to item 8, curl levers and jams policies update. I think that's you, Joe.
That is, yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm guessing you'll be pleased to hear that I'm going to keep this very, very brief. This is actually an update report, and the way that I would think about this is kind of tying off loose ends, because those of you who were members of the predecessor committee will remember that way back in the pre-COVID age, Councillor Louise McKinley from Essex County Council came along to talk to the committee about a couple of different initiatives that were starting in Essex, and which we were, very keen to either sort of be participants of or sort of sparked our own work streams. We're now getting to the point where we've got formal policy development as a response to that work, and those policies are, because of the nature of them, almost certainly going to go to different committees. So this isn't the policy themselves. This is not the actual policy for either of the two topics that we're talking about tonight. This is just simply to update the committee, to give you the confidence that the work has been happening, and then we'll close it off here, and the two policies that I'll be referring to will go off to their more relevant committees, and you'll see what we're talking about as we go through. I have asked Tom, who's our new Strategy Insights and Partnerships Manager, so AKA our Policy Manager, to join the meeting in case you have any specific questions of detail, but also I thought it was a good chance to bring him into the meeting so that you get an understanding of the fact that that role has now been filled. But I would just quickly run you through what we're talking about here, and then if there are any questions at the end, we can address them. But like I say, this is meant to be quite brief because it is just an update. A quick reminder about Just About Managing. I think I'm right in saying that everyone who heard from Councillor McKinley back when we had her to committee, it was quite eye-opening for all of us in terms of what Just About Managing tends to encompass, because this is describing a tranche of people, not just within Basildon, obviously, but there are prominent communities within Basildon who feature these characteristics, who they're not typically people who are in positions of extreme poverty or people who are in persistent worklessness or in those sorts of categories, but they're people who in many respects from the outside seem to be doing okay, but are actually struggling on a sort of month-to-month basis. Now, at the time, Councillor McKinley spoke us through the definitions used by the Resolution Foundation, and that was some work that Essex were using as their sort of guiding principle, and using that, and also using some stuff from the Roundtree Foundation as well. There's expected to be about nearly 5,000 working age adults who live together as dual parent households who are in that JAM category, and that comes along with a sort of correlating number of children as well. And that's when the cost of living in Essex is taken into account. So there are a lot of people who fit that criteria within Basildon. So it was a very pressing concern for us. And then also we've also used some of our own tools to look at some of the most prevalent household types in Basildon, and you can see on the second page of the report some of the statistics around that in terms of people who are classified as, and again, this is very sort of kind of specialist language, I guess, because it's this particular tools language, but it's called as people who are in a solid economy category, and they make up around about 6% of our borough's households. And these are quite often families where adults are aged between 26 and 55 and have children, and they're renting from a social landlord, and they have quite low income, and they tend to be in lower wage service roles. They might have relatively stable finances, but what these types of what people who happen to be in these types of categories can experience is that unexpected setbacks or costs can then really prove detrimental to their ability to carry on making ends meet. So I think you can probably guess where I'm going with all of this. The reason that things have evolved since we had that original conversation with Councillor McKinley was this was important back then, but now the impact of COVID and the impact of the pandemic and the types of things that we've heard from economic development colleagues today has all massively exacerbated the challenges that people who fit these criteria were already facing. And also although I think we're still waiting to see if we can get some updated information on this, it's also likely to have increased the number of people who fit into that category. So Councillor McGovern referenced the COVID working group earlier, and one of the key driving sort of imperatives for that working group was to look at what we could do to support people whose financial resilience will have been affected by COVID, and who won't necessarily be sort of doing as well now as they would have been before COVID, and with a specific emphasis on those people who will now be really struggling to make ends meet in a way that perhaps they wouldn't have been prior to the economic shocks of the coronavirus pandemic. So with all of that in mind, we have now taken this work, we have taken the work that we'd already started around the Just About Managing cohort, and have set that in the context of a much broader piece of work, looking at what we've termed financial inclusion and resilience. So how can we as a council, using the different levers at our disposal, work to support people to ensure that they can participate as much as possible within what the economy locally does have to offer, to ensure that we've got council services that are as responsive to their needs as possible. But this is a really important caveat, whilst bearing in mind the financial impact that COVID is having on us, and what's the range of support that we can perhaps look to coordinate with partners. So the financial inclusion and resilience work, the policy itself is in quite an advanced place now. There were some iterations of discussions at the COVID-19 working group, and the intention for that is to go ahead to one of the other service committees, almost certainly the policy and resources committees, because of the implications that that policy would have. And then similarly, we also heard from Councillor McKinley about the work that Essex County Council were doing to support care leavers. And if you remember, there was a very specific request for Basildon Council to join Essex County Council in its attempts to exempt care leavers from council tax, or care leavers under the age of 21 and under, I should say, to exempt them from the requirement to pay council tax. And that is something that we were very keen to do as a council. And I remember the committee was also very keen to support that as well. And we have already actioned that. That's already been implemented. So the work has been done to ensure that care leavers in that category are exempted from council tax. Alongside that, though, we are also looking at other ways in which we can support care leavers. And there's likely to be an emerging care leavers policy, which will look at understanding whether there are other sensible interventions that we can make to address some of these issues. And that will also go forward to a separate committee. I don't think that's actually been established which one that will be, but it will almost certainly be either policy and resources or housing and communities. So I think that's where I would leave that for the time being, but very happy to take any questions that people may have.
Hello. There we go. Councillor McGarren.
Yeah, Councillor Davis, do you want to come in?
No, I was just stepping in as vice chair because I didn't see you as about.
Sorry, apologies. Yeah.
No worries.
Anyone else indicating? Oh, Councillor Buckley, I think. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Sargent was before me, but it was when yours disappeared. So. Okay, I only just really wanted to make one brief point, actually, which relates to the comments regarding the Mosaic segmentation tool. And it defines, amongst the other bullet points, renting from a social landlord as being people that were in the biggest problems. There are a lot of people that are either renting rooms, privately renting properties, or even people with a mortgage that are in that same financial position. I'm concerned to make sure that we're addressing their needs as well. There are issues, I know, like mortgage holidays and various reliefs and so on. But I wonder if perhaps you could just expand a little on that. Care leavers is something we're all concerned about, and I have many years ago dealt with care leavers in my former professional role, and it is always a big issue for care leavers, for example, to get accommodation because they haven't got a track record. Often they haven't got a significant income, and therefore the properties that they can get are the ones that are substandard that you see on one of these rogue landlord TVs quite frequently. So I don't know whether you can expand a little bit on that, but overall we're doing the right thing on this particular matter.
Shall I come back on that, Chair? Is that okay?
Of course it is, Joe. Yeah.
Just a couple of things. In complete agreement with your first points, Councillor Buckley, and actually the really interesting thing from what came out, I suppose it's probably because you obviously missed the first presentation, even though it was a long time ago, so we could have included a bit more contextual information thinking about it. But the Mosaic stuff is meant to complement what Councillor McKinley presented rather than in any way replace it. But one of the really interesting things that the work that Essex and other the organisations that they were working with had revealed was that actually some of the most at risk in pressure or under pressure groups were those people living, like you say, in private rented accommodation. That's actually one of the key sort of drivers often of people who end up falling into that just about managing category. I think what we were trying to show with the Mosaic data is just how prevalent some of that much more lower income type of community is within Basildon, but definitely recognise the point. And the financial inclusion and resilience policy will be looking at this. Definitely recognise the point that it's not limited to any one specific tenure type, because it's defined by whether or not someone's struggling and whether or not someone's on the verge of a catastrophe if they get a setback, more than it is what their position happens to be. Notwithstanding, you're right to point out that obviously the government intervention has been much stronger for people who are in a position of needing to pause paying their mortgages than the stuff that they've been able to do for renters. But yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And on the care leavers stuff, I mean, the sort of the thing that's taking the time with this, and I mean that in a good way, because we are taking the time to try to make it as comprehensive as possible, is working with the council's different services to try to get an understanding of what the art of the possible is, and then what would be a realistic aim given the restraints that we're under. And I'm pretty sure, and Tom will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the work we've been doing to date has definitely included our housing colleagues, because obviously it's not possible for us just to magically go, here you are, here's somewhere to live, but we do have a key role that we as a council can directly play in trying to find those people accommodation when they would struggle in the private market. So yeah, it's something that we're looking at.
Right. Sorry, who's next? Anyone?
Me.
Sorry, Councillor Sargent.
Yes, thank you. Joe, I wish you'd have said in your report that you know, that the object of the report really is to end it off from this committee, because it, you know, it didn't read like this. I did wonder what the actual report was for, apart from, because we never knew before about the policies that were coming forward. But there's been some really good stuff that's come out of the jams to help these people, and it's not always about money. It's I know there was something about the laptop scheme. Basildon agreed for, was it 250 laptops to go to into the scheme?
I don't know about that personally. I do know that we've been involved.
I know that it was spoken about. Sorry.
No, carry on.
I think this was spoken about, whether it was at policy, or I know Councillor Callaghan, I believe he was involved. But there's been so many things, activities during school time, looking after children while the parents are working, because that's really at the crux of this, because most of these parents are working. Some of them are, you know, they could be on low wages, but the idea is to keep them in work and really support them. I mean, to be honest, I'm sure the best thing to do is to take it away, but I was quite enjoying these two, you know, particularly with the care leavers, because you know, all the boroughs supported this and gave the care leaguers the support, as we did for the council tax. And you know, even though it is going away from us, it would be good to get some kind of update as to, or to view the policies. I think that would be nice, because I think there was some very good work that was going on, because it isn't just about the money, you know, because everybody's thinking about that, whereas it's the actual initiatives and schemes that you put in to help those families that can get them through the really difficult times. Anyhow, thank you, Joe.
Can I just come back on that quickly? I mean, I just want to say that it's a really good point, because trying to think of the right way of phrasing this, but people who are in that sort of persistently unemployed category, there's already a sort of raft of interventions and measures in place for them, and you're absolutely right to differentiate between that cohort and the people that we're trying to help with some of this intervention, which is people who characteristically or historically perhaps have been a bit more overlooked. But we recognise that, especially given the current climate of COVID, it wouldn't take for that much for them to move from where they currently are into that space of perpetual unemployment. So yeah, completely agree with that. I'm happy to perhaps we can consider outside of the meeting what might be a good way of doing it, but perhaps we could bring back a concluding presentation or something like that that gives a bit of detail of where we've ended up.
Can I just say, Joe, like slightly take issue. I think Basildon has been taking the lead on this. So Essex, yeah, we had a very productive meeting with Louise McKinley from Essex County Council. And we went away and said, you know, yeah, we're going to take on board the points you're making. We've put them into policy in some cases, and we're working on expanding that so that we're the pioneers of, you know, Essex, the care leavers policy in Essex. So I'm not sure why we should be, you know, reluctant.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective as officers who are working on this, the meeting that we had at the beginning of the year was a very helpful launch point. But what we're doing now will be uniquely Basildon focused, and will be as ambitious as we can be in its outlook, definitely.
Thank you. Anything else on that? No. As I think the report's for noting, we can move on. I think it's now, oh, this should be fun. Brexit preparations with Paul, one and only Paul Birkinshaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Just caught me before I went to bed, but pleased to join you. I know you've had a long evening. Yeah, just to give you an update, really, I think as we discussed earlier, probably more appropriate to come to the next meeting of the committee. And happy to do that and keep you updated as it progresses. But obviously, I think it was an issue which the committee had asked to come. So happy to do that and provide you with a brief update. I'm just going to share my screen if I can and just run through a couple on a very small number of slides. You will be glad to hear. I won't go through them in detail, but I'll just provide a bit of a framework for the discussion. And obviously we have prepared for EU exit in the past, so we were geared up before, working through the local resilience forum. We had an internal group established and was doing work through that. And I was designated as the EU exit lead officer, which each local authority had to do. And we did a lot of work around business engagement, around promoting the settlement scheme, and in terms of preparation as well as briefing for members. And then obviously the preparations took a back seat following in the agreement and the negotiations that are ongoing. And we kind of await with interest now. So I think as members will be aware, the deadline for an agreement is the 31st of October. And that kind of just goes back to the comment I made about helpful to come back to the next meeting, because we're in essence waiting for the outcome of that agreement. And depending on what agreement is reached or not, what that might mean and what preparations might need to be made. So we've had some internal discussions just to keep an oversight of this, but we've not in essence stepped up our arrangements, re-established the group, etc. But we're kind of ready to do that, and we'll start to do that in early November. But the key thing obviously is that this the deadline for the agreement is the 31st of October. And if agreement is reached, then many of the issues will go through a longer transition and be perhaps easier than if not. So we're kind of await with interest, and the next European Council meeting takes place over the next couple of days. Don't want to go into, but negotiation determine future cooperation on a range of issues, which are set out there, but don't need to go into detail, I think. I just really want to, just update on the key issues really, and draw members' attention. I think most members are aware now of the local resilience forum, the Essex Resilience Forum, which we're a member of. That's a multi-agency partnership, all category 1 responders that come together to deal with incidents across various organisations in the county. And the Essex Resilience Forum really is the lead body for this, and we actively participate in their work. And that's where we collectively as agencies address some of the issues and challenges that may be faced. And obviously we've been doing that for the last few months on COVID, and continue to do so through the Essex Resilience Forum. An EU exit transition will also be a matter that the Essex Resilience Forum will deal with. And the Resilience Forum, likewise, it's been a bit of a back burner for them, obviously, whilst dealing with COVID, but that's starting to come to the fore again. In terms of very recently happened over the last, let's say, few weeks. But you can see on the slide there the themes and the key themes that have been focused on. That's ports, road, loss of IT, protest and shortages, as well as some of the other risk themes that are set out in terms of impact to health and social care, community impacts, etc. So we will participate in them, but I think the key issue for Basildon really is that there's no, and we briefed members on this previously, and I think members acknowledge this position, that there's no immediate direct impact for Basildon Borough Council per se. Primarily the focus at the moment is on those with ports. So those local authorities with ports are regarded as having the biggest challenges and are receiving the largest amount of funding. And also the upper tier authorities in terms of their health and social care responsibilities, trading standards responsibilities. It's a bigger impact for them. And that's been reflected in the funding which government has given in the past to support the work of local authorities. Our main focus really is around ensuring that we continue to operate and meet our obligations. Did a lot of good work previously, Tom Ash's team, around informing businesses. So we had business newsletters, engagement with businesses to try support and help them. I think it's fair to say that the businesses in essence were managing it themselves and using other avenues. So there wasn't a huge demand from businesses on the council to support them in EU exit, but that will remain an area where we're conscious of the impact on businesses and we'll seek to support that. We have for a long time, we continue to help residents retain the rights under the EU settlement scheme. We've been promoting that. And I think the issue is then around contingency business continuity planning, and that's around the impact of shortages, perhaps in fuel, or impact on the road network that may affect Basildon and the delivery of our services. But that's kind of business continuity things. And you know, if the roads, huge issues with the roads and the ports nearby, not that different to dealing with inclement weather and the impact on that in terms of our business continuity. And then main focus is, as I say, we'll step up as required depending on the outcome of negotiations that I've just mentioned. But some of them we continue to go forward now and in a pretty good position. I think finally, some of the main issues that we will are working on to ensure that our operations are ready and meet the obligations, as I've mentioned, about business continuity plans. So ensuring that services can continue to operate even when there's that impact, management of supply chains, procurement. So in terms of the move from the urdu and issues around state aid, I think the changes to authorisations, staff, making sure that staff in our recruitment processes are appropriate. So just some that are set out there, GDPR and how that data transfer between the EU and the UK will apply. Those are seen really as the main issues directly for us, but primarily it's a case of working through the ARF to support them as necessary on the wider implications, and just ensuring that the council is ready. As I said at the outset, really, we are, it's taken a back seat because we've been waiting and to see how things progress, and we still wait to a degree until the 31st of October and some clarity. But as you would expect, we have of recent weeks been now turning our attention back to this, recognising it as a potential issue on the horizon, and we will respond accordingly when we get clarity on the 31st. And as I said at the outset and spoke to you earlier, Chairman, happy to come along to the next meeting obviously members will be aware of the outcome of the negotiations through the national media. But obviously, depending on what that is, I can come and provide further information. It might be that we have moved on, the ARF's kicking on with its work, we've established the internal working group and we're putting more resources and efforts into it. But as I say, we did do work previously we got ourselves in a good position, and I think we will quickly get ourselves back into that good position to prepare and ensure that the council is prepared for EU exit in due course. Hopefully that update is helpful. Members are not really missing anything at the moment, but we will continue to keep you updated. Happy to take any questions if necessary.
Thanks, Paul. Anyone else? Anyone want to come in with a question there? Okay, Councillor Buckley.
Not really a question, just in agreement with Mr. Birkinshaw that really all of this is something that until we have an outcome, I don't think it will go to the end of the month personally, but once we have an outcome, we will know whether we're affected. But I think we are fortunate as an authority that most of what we do is not going to be directly impacted. There will be, I think, some benefits. For example, coming out of OJU will be beneficial or make life simpler at least. So that is something. I think one of the things which was mentioned, it was under the resilience package that was discussed, was about ports. And obviously we know that Kent is bringing in a pass type scheme of some sort for heavy goods vehicles. And I wonder about the knock-on effect, which is a question I'm raising at Essex as well, but about the knock-on effect to Essex. And in particular, will it have an impact on us here through London Gateway or Tilbury ports? Right, they're not technically in Essex and they're not in our borough, but London Gateway in particular is literally on the verge of our borough. And if there are issues, we're going to feel that impact. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of. I don't know what the solution is, but I think we need to be ready to deal with it if there is an issue comes up.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to say anything on that?
No, I'd agree with Councillor Buckley. And yeah, that is an issue that the Essex Resilience Forum is. I recall from previous preparations, that was an issue. Yeah, you know, these issues don't stop at borders really, and then the London corridors and things are issues, and how that impacts on Essex, or the traffic modelling that's done. And obviously that shows the value really of the local resilience forum in terms of bringing all them relevant agencies together. But yeah, I fully agree with what Councillor Buckley says, and the resilience forum would likewise agree. So it is an issue that is in terms of that ports issues I mentioned, but also roads, and that's very much the point that Councillor Buckley refers. Like I don't profess to have the answer. I think there is government working around large-scale lorry parks and trying to keep them away from.
Well, if you've got the answer, you could make yourself a fortune, mate.
I could, yeah, but unfortunately not. So I'll keep battling on. But in summary, I fully agree. And as things progress, then no doubt that information will come forward through the local resilience forum.
Chairman, can we have a copy of the slides, please?
Certainly.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, anyone else on this? I mean, it is a slightly difficult one because we know in a couple of weeks it'll be clearer, and then Paul will come back in December. But yeah, so I don't know. Thank you very much, Paul, for the presentation. At the moment, it is a bit unclear, but you know, I thought you made a very good presentation of where we are at this particular point in time, and that will change. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, so work programme. Anyone got any issues on the work programme? Oh, Councillor Sargent. Yes, Councillor Sargent.
Would it be worth putting Kickstart onto a future onto the programme?
Possibly. Tomasz, what do you reckon?
Yes, Chair, I would strongly recommend we do. to try and help members, and perhaps for Jim and I to come back with some reassurance and alternative options to help members. We're going to explore a couple of options tomorrow further, and therefore I would suggest if we can come back to the next committee, that would be really helpful.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Anyone else on the work programme? No? Okay. Thank you very much. It's been a bit longer than we anticipated, but useful as always. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time and effort, and good night, God bless.